everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Please let me know if you can...
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, that's me. Hear and see me. I would appreciate that very much. That would be great. Wonderful. Cool. Awesome. Great. Hello there. Welcome to the stream. I should put on some musica. This is gonna be a pretty chill little hangout. Obviously, this is our normal time for Lorebeards.
See you at least.
Well, that's good. Thank you, Lachord Chris, for the 10 months. This is gonna be a pretty relaxing time, but good news is that Andy, to my understanding, is feeling much better. But we wanted to play it a little safe and make sure that he really is, you know, at his best. So, healing up well. So we are going to be resuming Lorebeards next week, assuming there's no, you know, sudden changes or concerns or something. Oh God, what do I want? I've been, I've been on a Zelda kick lately because I'm playing through the new Echoes of Wisdom game. Oh my God, that's so loud. There we go. I've been playing through Echoes of Wisdom. Good time. Very good game. Highly recommend. If anyone is even remotely a Zelda fan. Pretty freaking good so far. And the hero mode has good difficulty. I was getting infuriated dealing with one of the little challenges that was in it, but I beat it, so that's the important thing. So anyway, lovely to see you all. I'm just gonna ramble for a few minutes to give people a minute to hop in if they're so inclined, because sometimes it takes people just a little bit to wander in. I am very excited to get back to Lorebeards. For those that maybe aren't aware of the schedule, me and Andy will be resuming with the End Times Part 2, which that actually reminds me, something I wanted to ask y'all about is, so I don't like watching my own videos because I don't like listening to myself. But I do not remember, because it was over a year, well, not over a year ago, but it was quite some time ago. I don't actually remember how much of the End Times Andy and I covered in the first one. Like, I know we talked quite a bit about End Times Nagash, and I think we talked about Glotkin a fair bit. So, because I would rather not retread old ground with the next Lorebeards thing. So, I kind of think that it would be better to figure out mostly what we talked about and then start off at, you know, whatever came next. Which, based on, I think Andy thought we did not get to End Times Cain, so we might start with End Times Cain and try to get through Thanquol, and that would be kind of the general aim we're going for, and then we would later do a part 3 where we talk about End Times Archaon. But I don't know. If anybody has watched it recently or is interested in rewatching it, and being like, oh, hey, y'all kind of talked about XY, ABC, XY, you know, all the stuff. That would be deeply appreciated if you would send me a DM on that, or just you like hit at me on the Discord and be like, this is what you rambled about, because that would prevent us from repeating ourselves. In any event, hopefully everyone is doing quite well and having an excellent week. I apologize that I've been kind of absent for a bit because I got like a little sick for a tiny bit, but I have not been actually like super sick. I've mostly just been busy working on videos. So, and I just, for some reason, I have a particular form of brain rot where I'm either working on videos or I am live streaming, but I can't seem to do both very well within like the same set of days. So I do apologize for the lack of streams lately, but hopefully y'all been enjoying some of the videos that have been coming out, and there's some really fun ones that are going to be coming out soon, including a new tinfoil hat video that I think is going to be I think I'm going to get made fun of a lot, but I'm very comfortable with that. But some of y'all are going to find it very exciting. But I think most people are going to look at it and go, this guy has lost his fucking mind, which is good. That's what tinfoil hat videos are for. Anywho, yeah, so, and we also have, like, units from the end times for Kane, Glutkin, and Nagash coming out relatively quickly as well. So, without further ado, I think we've rambled on long enough about little stuff. Once again, the goal is that Andy will return next Sunday, which is October 6th, with End Times Part 2, and then that following Wednesday, we will do the tier list for the Council of 13, and then we'll carry on. So the Sunday after that will be Andy and Sotek's, or the Lorebeards wish list for Total War Warhammer, which is going to be a really funny video because we're deliberately going to make it, I'm going to encourage us to be as unhinged as possible, like to reach down deep into our hearts and say the things that we would really want to see in the game, that even regardless of how realistic they are. Because a wish list, in my opinion, should not be realistic. It should be what you actually deeply want. Anywho. So, yeah, that should be pretty much everything. This will be essentially just during the normal Lorebeards slot, so we're gonna go for about 3 hours, and then I gotta peace out, because I've got WFRP sessions on Sundays. So I have to go play in my campaign. Because one of my party members got kidnapped by a big bad last session, because we were trying to run away, and running away proved a lot more difficult than I had anticipated. A lot more difficult than I had anticipated. Because we finally ran into our first special character, and I didn't want to die, so we ran away. Anywho, there are a number of people that sent in super chats before the start of the stream, quite a few actually, so I appreciate that. Just a reminder, the way we do these things here, or I do these things here, because it's just me today. Even though this is not officially a Lorebeards episode, this is just me rambling. But this is just Sotek time. But I will prioritize super chats just to make sure those people get their money's worth. But I will also be looking out for regular messages as well. So, without further ado, let's hop into it. What is this? Oh, Bossby and the lad's been talking. Who do you think you would win? One of them Umi Bird Lions or one of them Humi... Oh, Griffin versus a Manticore? I mean, Griffin versus Manticore is classic, right? Like, that is the most classic matchup. Or, like, when it comes to monsters. I don't know if there's one as classic and famous as the Manticore versus the Griffin, because they're very, very, very even. I think it would depend on the circumstances. A Griffin is gonna be able to outwit a Manticore big time.
X100.
But,
what are your thoughts on the new Dawi book?
Okay, for the rest of the stream, I'm gonna turn off stream alerts just so they don't interrupt me, but I will read those. What are my thoughts on the new Dawi book? I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited. So for those that haven't seen, Cubicle 7's about to release the player's handbook for dwarfs. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous about it because Cubicle 7's books tend to be very hit and miss, in that there are parts of the books that I really like, but there's always inevitably parts I really dislike because they make some peculiar decisions from time to time. So I have mixed feelings about them. The dwarfs in particular have been a little annoying for me in Cubicle 7 because, like, if you read the Sea of Claws book, which has the Norskin dwarf stuff, and you also read the part 4 of The Enemy Within, which is the Horned Rat, which has some dwarf stuff, I really dislike the way it handles Thorgrim Grudgebearer. I don't think the writing that talks about him is very good. And also the Norskin dwarf stuff just completely fucked up his involvement in the Norskin dwarf timeline, which should have been included. Should have been a major part of that aspect of the book, and he doesn't really even get mentioned. And I was really disappointed by that. So, like, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also expecting it to have some annoying issues. But anywho, and answer your question, Hawk. Generally, I side on Team Griffin because Griffins are smarter than Manticores. They're just smarter. A Manticore is more ferocious. It also has venomous tails, which helps So like if they just fight, just like you put them in a room with like no environment or anything, just make them fight to the death, the Manticore I think would win. But in nature, I think a Griffin will usually defeat a Manticore because the Griffins are much smarter. And Manticores are more like frenzied attack helicopters, whereas Griffins are far more strategic in how they engage with other monsters. Anyway, let's get into it. So we have a couple super chats right here at the start. Let's go ahead and start with these. So Captain Magma, thank you very much for the question. What genre of music do you imagine characters listen to? For example, Malekith would be listening to emo music in my head. So generally speaking, I think that has more to do with personality type stuff. But some things that have come to mind to me that I think are interesting to think about. When it comes to Lizardman characters in particular, I think when you have like Mazdamundi would want to, and all Slann in general, would want to really listen to music that has like a really specific organized structure. Like it's very organized, it has a very strong rhythmic pattern to it, and it's designed to calm and like help someone center themselves. I think it's the kind of stuff you'd be seeing like the likes of Mazdamundi listening to. I think the vast majority of the Lizardman characters would probably listen to music that is more exciting. Music that has like really strong, really rapid fire staccato type drums that you tend to hear a lot actually if you delve into the music that was used for a lot of ceremonies and rituals and tribal dances that you would find in the cultures that hung around a lot of like South America down in, or up into Central America, where like drums are used to help measure everything that's going on. And because a lot of it came with like particular kinds of dancing, and the drums are really important to that, and all the other instruments are kind of there to add flavor, but it's mostly about percussion. I think Lizardman would be all about percussion, and like styles of music that rely very heavily on drums. Tehenuan I do think would be unique. I think Tehenuan would actually be very different, but I'm not exactly sure what I imagine him listening to other than stuff to get pumped up and kind of angry. Like, Tehenuan strikes me as the guy that would be sitting in traffic and would purposely be listening to music that gets him pissed off. Like, it gets his blood going. But when it comes to Dark Elves, I think Malekith would probably be likely to listen to emo music privately, but I think most Dark Elves would actually listen to things that are much more bombastic than you might suspect. And I don't think Malekith would admit that he listens to emotional music. I think generally he would lean into portraying himself in a different way. High Elves would probably listen to... I imagine High Elves being very snobbish, and listening like only to classical, only to like particular types of music that follow like high thought, high theory when it comes to musical theory, and are like really specific and have like age to them. Dwarfs would be super traditional. A lot of folk music, a lot of music that's about doing work, surviving troubles, enduring. So like very folksy. Not folksy as in like American country music. Folksy as in like Irish folk music or Scottish folk music, or more of that older time music that is all about just like surviving difficult times. But I also do think dwarfs, the working class dwarfs, would listen to a lot of music that has really specific rhythm to it, because it's supposed to assist with work. In that, when you hear certain, like on a certain beat within the music is when you're supposed to strike your pick or strike your hammer or other such things. Chaos would just listen to like the heaviest of scream death metal they could get their grubby little paws on. But there would probably be a lot of amusing things within it. I think when it comes to cultures like the Empire, it would probably be a lot more complex. But because like within the Empire, there'd probably be some amusing aspects about how certain provinces would think that listening to certain kinds of music is inappropriate. Like the Sigmarites would be almost, I think, Puritan in a lot of their views about how music should be encountered. But hopefully that's enough random thoughts for you to have some ideas. Aleph Flux. Oh, you submitted a whole bunch of questions. Aleph Flux, what's your take on the gods of law, such as Solkan, Ariankan, etc., in modern fantasy battle? Why are they of law specifically compared to every other non-chaos god? So, the gods of law are interesting because they are obviously from a much older set of Warhammer Fantasy, and they're taken from other IPs. I believe they have more to do with Michael Moorcock type writings. But as to what the gods of law actually are in modern fantasy, this is covered a fair bit in Archives of the Empire Volume 3, which talks about like the lesser, like the not as prominent deities. It's a very cult focused book because it has things like Renal, the druidic cults, or not cults, but the druidic folk, the hedge wizards, and the things that they believe. And it also has a big focus on, I think, Renald and Raya. I think Handrick has a chapter, and then there's like a whole thing on the gods of law. And the gods of law, from what's written about them, mostly come from the classical side of the world. So they come from like Talea and Astalia and that southern side of the old world. And what they are specifically is they are gods that seem to utterly reject chaos and want to bring a fairly brutal focus to the world. And there's danger in that, where Solkan is a god of brutality. He is a god that is extremely exacting, that burns away corruption, but Solkan's definition of corruption is very broad and is dangerous. Because the gods of... There's a constant thing, right? When you talk about chaos, you'll usually have someone walk into the room and ask questions like, take Khorne, for instance, where people will theorize about the idea of like, well, what if the chaos gods have like a good side? Like, what if Khorne represents like honor in battle alongside rage and all these other things? Which, if you've been watching Lorebeards for long enough, you know that that's not really true. The chaos gods are a very cancerous interpretation of all the things they represent, of these things taken to excess, and they don't actually have redeeming sides. Those are glamours or illusions to make the chaos gods look more appealing to people that can be seduced by them. However, there is the argument to be made that there are things that the dark gods are able to take advantage of, or things that they are related to in a fashion, and the gods of law do not blur lines. The gods of law are very much they are black and white gods. They are gods that see things as evil or good, and there is no separation. And that makes them super dangerous, because an entity that does not understand nuance is an entity that is going to kill a lot of people that have not done anything wrong. And Solkan, along with the rest of the gods of laws, that's a lot of their focus, is that they represent law in a sense of bringing order in a way that makes the lizardmen blush. There's also some notes in there, though, that the gods of law have quite a focus on that they were gods that fought the chaos gods at the beginning of when chaos came into the world, and they lost bad. And all of them either died or have vanished in some way, with Solkan believed to be the only survivor. And there are some notes about like how Arianka ties into like a Kislevite myth, but that's generally how I view them. I think there can be a lot of nuance within those takes, and how they mix into the other gods of the Warhammer Fantasy universe, like how they tie into the Elven gods, or how they tie into the other gods of the old world, is something you could wax really, really lyrical about for a long time, but they've only very, very recently returned to the setting. Because with the exception of Solkan and I guess Arianka, they barely got any screen time after like maybe 3rd edition Warhammer Fantasy. The Gods of Law have not been mentioned forever. And Sulcan popped up in a lot of Black Library books, particularly the Brunner the Bounty Hunter series. Sulcan plays a huge role in that storyline, and Sulcan also plays a major role in the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st edition series. But outside of those, especially from the battle games perspective, the Gods of Law are non-existent. And were never talked about and just kind of forgotten. So it was very nice to see Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition bring them back. But if you want to check out more about them, I'd check out that book. Second question from Alafux. Where do the OG tribes of the Empire come from? I've been building a theory, but I want to double check if you have sources that I've missed. So when it comes to humans of the old world, the OG tribes of the Empire, the vast... depends on what you mean by OG. The vast majority of all of the Empire's tribes came from the East. So they came from the Chaos Wastes, essentially. They came from what we know as the Eastern Steppes, or the lands north of the Eastern Steppes, before Chaos kind of continued to expand and they eventually left for all of their own reasons. Many of them, as we've talked about with Andy, are Chaos tribes by history. Obviously none of them worship Chaos now anymore, or by the time they arrived in the Empire, none of them worship Chaos anymore, but their history ties back to Chaos worship. Something that I've actually been really wanting to do a video on, I might push to do a Lorebeards on it, but at the very least I'd like to talk about it myself. And here I'm actually going to pull up a guide here to talk about this, because I think it's worth pointing out. So looking at this fan-made, to be clear, fan-made map of Warhammer the Warhammer world, right? The origin of humanity is a notable... No, I don't want to crop it. Is a notable talking point, right? Where it's like, oh, well, where did humans come from? Because if you look at our world's history, a lot of the evidence that we have from like anthropology and all that stuff talks about how a lot of it seems very likely that pretty much all of humanity started somewhere in Africa and kind of like worked its way outwards. And oftentimes what they want to do with Warhammer is mirror a lot of the things that happen in our world, especially when it comes to humanity, and go from there. And we do know that there are early humans that come from the Southlands, where in this region here is where like the ancestors of Nehekara come from. Of that, the old ones created humanity in the Southlands and they expanded outwards, and this led to people moving up into the lands that we would call Nehekara, and then those people continued to expand out north, east, and west, which led to people moving into what we now know as the Badlands, and up into Talay and Nestalia and the Border Princes, and as far up as the Empire, where Cetra's nation went all the way up to the mountains, and maybe even a little beyond, the Black Mountains. But then we have notes that you have the people of Grand Cathay up here have seemingly been there kind of forever, where the old ones seem to have almost made them in Grand Cathay, and the Celestial Dragon Emperor met them, these early human tribes. And then we also have some further information talking about the ancestors of the old world, especially when you're dealing with Norskins, or like pretty much everyone in the old world, as far as like the Empire, Bretonnia, Norskin, all that stuff, seem to have come from up here, coming from the northern Chaos Wastes, and they were Chaos tribes that eventually migrated their way down to the old world. So you have all of these different origin points for humanity, and the question is, did humanity have a singular starting point, and over the course of thousands and thousands and thousands of years they just migrated across the planet, or do you go with the older lore we have written, which seems to suggest that humanity had several starting points and then migrated from those starting points. Because the old ones, if you go back and watch our old one stream, the old ones were a really complex race that were doing multiple projects simultaneously all over the world, where different old ones were working on different things and they each had different specialities. So it's very possible that humanity, very uniquely, one of the things that's talked about a lot in the lore is that the old ones saw in humanity a potential that was unmatched by any other race. That humanity was going to be like their ultimate creation, but they were left unfinished. That humanity, their adaptability, their relationship with the ether, which is a really complex subject, led to this idea that the old ones had. Oh, I didn't even talk about the people of Albion. They're also seemingly a race that was specifically created by the old ones. Another human group being from Albion. So when you're looking at all of this, you have evidence that seems to suggest that the old ones, multiple different old ones, created humanity at the same time or around the same time, and these humans started to spread to different parts of the world. And this is something Games Workshop has just not really explored as a concept, because something that I would very much like to see, if you look at like how the Chaos Waste, this big northern land, connects all of the globe, something that Games Workshop has not done that me and Andy have talked quite a bit about is that we have no idea what is going on here, or here, or pretty much any of this, or any of this, or any of this. We don't know we don't know what's going on there. We don't know who lives there. We don't know like what races are doing things there. We have ideas, but we don't know a lot of the specifics. And it would be my hope that Games Workshop would make humanity more of a global species like they should be, because it allows for more explorations of ideas, where they should take these northern tribes that we all know and exist, and there should be stories about how before the Dark Elves started doing Dark Elf things, a bunch of human tribes populated Nagaroth, and ancient primordial humans wandered into here and even made their way as far south as Lustria and populated these regions. And maybe they didn't survive, but many of them should have. And now, like, you had humans that crossed the ocean here to get to Nippon, and humans that came down into Koresh, and you had humans that came down into the Nations of End. Like, you have all these different places humanity could be that would be very, very nice to see explored, because it allows us to have more cultures that we can have reflected in the Warhammer world. Where instead of having it where the entirety of all cultures that have ever existed in Central and South America are made into Lizardmen and Amazons and that's it, you introduce a lot of human tribes that make a lot more sense. Of that, there would have been land bridges between a lot of these places. A lot of the Warhammer world was a singular continent, was a Pangea before it broke up into all of these different continents. So there's a lot of places for humans to be everywhere. And that's one of my bigger nitpicks with the current setup with humanity, is that they're not nearly as ubiquitous as they should be. Like, humanity should literally be everywhere in the Warhammer world. And it shouldn't be everywhere because of colonists in the modern age. Like, it shouldn't be like, oh, the Empire has colonies everywhere, or Astalia has colonies everywhere, whatever. No, it should be that humanity in ancient times spread like a virus and was fucking everywhere, because that's what humans do. Humans are like greenskins. They adapt really, really well, and they spread everywhere. They're an infection almost, and that just allows you to have a lot more interesting stories to be told, and that's something I hope Games Workshop does. In addition to adding in new races, like I am a very big believer that the Centaur should be brought back to be the Southern Nagaroth dominant race. That on the continent of Nagaroth there is an ancient people of Centaurs, who are kind of the true rulers of that continent. And the Dark Elves are, in the grand scheme of the world, relatively, they're colonizers that hug around that Great Lake region in the north, and don't go further out, because the Centaurs will whoop their asses if they're not careful. But that's something that I've been personally theorizing about a lot. But hopefully it answers that. Aleph Flux, bonus round. Why are the Eudoses painting themselves blue and unfazed when Sigmar wipes out the Norsey? Albanese vibes, but I'm not sure. That kind of just boils down to the author, which I assume you're referencing the Eudoses, so the tribes from Graham McNeil's set of novels. That's a better Andy question, I think, overall. But when it comes to why were more people not nervous when it came to what Sigmar was up to, and like detailing how this various tribes were described, I think that while Graham McNeil's series is great, it's awesome, it's got a lot of really cool stuff, I think it also did not go as far as it should have when describing the various cults from the Empire, the various tribes, where the 12 tribes should have been significantly more different than they're even portrayed in that book. They should have been... a lot of the tribes, when you're dealing with like Oslan and Ostermark, are a lot more Eastern than people think they are. In that, like the old world, the Empire, the Warhammer world is fucking gigantic. Like it dwarfs our planet. It's so much bigger than our planet. And because of that, like the Empire is gigantic. The Empire is more like Europe, not Germany. So like each of those provinces are very, very different kinds of people. Both ethnically, historically, culturally. I said both. In all three of those ways. So, the Eudoses, as far as like, why wouldn't they be nervous after seeing the Norse get wiped out? Because if they follow along with the other tribes to join Sigmar, they join Sigmar. They agreed to his terms. He said, hey, y'all come be a part of my empire. You're not allowed to worship these chaos gods, and you have to follow by like a certain set of rules and things like that, but like we're all in this together. The tribes that told Sigmar no got the shit kicked out of them. The Norsey told him no, they got kicked out. The Bretonnia told him no, they got kicked out. So it just kind of boils down to that. Think Team, hi Sotek, something I've been wondering is what exactly is a Gorebeast? Is it just a random chaos mutant, or is it a stable mutation like Griffins? You know what? I'm actually gonna pull up the chat on screen. That way y'all can like see the questions that I'm on. Because I'm stupid and didn't use StreamYard, so I can't pull them up the normal way. So here you go. So we're on this one. So what is a Gorebeast? A Gorebeast is a mutated creature that is from the Northern Chaos Wastes. So it is if you actually look at what it is, it kind of looks like a big gorilla, but it's got reptilian features in addition to that kind of gorilla body shape. So it's got like the big over large arms that it like drags itself forward on its knuckles. And if you look at its feet, it has like weirdly human looking back feet. Like where they've got like the 5 toes, your 5 toes with the toenails, and like their feet look eerily human. But they're scaled, and they have a reptilian head with like a big reptilian maw with sharp pointy teeth, and basically they're just weird mutated creatures. But they are like griffins, yes, because they're a stable species. where if you see a gore beast, there are features you can describe that appropriately describe a gore beast, where they are that level of stable. So I would say they're like griffins. Sometimes there might be individual differences between them due to mutations and things of that nature. But overall, I think it would be very appropriate and accurate to call them similar to griffins. But they're creatures that are native to the Chaos Waste, and they're really big and strong. But there's not that much information on them other than just like they're big brutal monsters that are really strong, because the chariots they pull are the heaviest type of chariot the Chaos Hordes are capable of making, being that those chariots are made of are super fucking heavy iron. So anyway, yeah. Laughing God, hey, I hope you are well. How do I feel about the current state of WFRP, and what direction would I like to see it go? Also, new Dwarf book. Yeah, I'm excited for the new Dwarf book. What direction do I want to see WFRP go? I want WFRP. That's a tough one. I kind of wish WFRP would do like a 2-then-1 system, and that I would like them to do 2 books that focus on new things, and then 1 book that rewrites an old thing. So, like, for instance, they're about to release the Dwarf Player's Handbook. Great. And then I think after that, they're releasing a Dwarf book more for GMs that, like, describes the Kara-Thanquol and the various Dwarven realms within the Dwarven Kingdom. Great. Awesome. So that's, like, 2 new things. And then for an old thing, I think it'd be nice to see them, like, cover another city in the Empire, or do a new Bretonnia book, where obviously they take a lot of inspiration from the 2nd edition Knights of the Grail book, but they update it to more appropriately match what Bretonnia has become, especially with the new Old World lore, where, like, you can have, like, Lady Knights and a bunch of other exceptions, or, like, things that used to not be allowed but are now totally fine. So, like, an updated book for Bretonnia would be great, or an updated book for Kislev would be great, or an updated book for Norska would be great. Because, like, Sea of Claws had some Norscan stuff, but it wasn't really about Norska. It's more about naval stuff. So I would love that. I also really want them to do a Cathay book. Like, Cathay seems really locked in, and Games Workshop seems to have a good idea of what they're doing with Cathay. So I'd really love for them to take that to do something with that. But you know what? As much as I like this, I also like being able to actually just read the chat. So I'm just going to go back to the screen because y'all can see yourselves talking. It's fine, whatever. Let's see. Blue Milk Alien Monster. What should Thanquol's campaign mechanics be? How should he work in battle? Thanquol's campaign should... There are 2 ways you could do it, in my opinion. You could either do a Malachi Makaisen type system, where Thanquol has various sets of assignments he's given by the Council of 13 and the Greyseer Clan Scrutin, and he's able, like, your goal is to try and, like, fulfill those various missions you're being given, and, like, depending on how well you fulfill them, you get certain kinds of rewards. So kind of similar to Malachi Makaisen's adventures, because Thanquol does have his own trilogy of novels, in addition to showing up in a lot of other books that allow him to have a lot of really fun little representations of things. Alternatively, you could focus on just having him represent the Greyseer clan, where there's more of a system revolving around fulfilling various requests to deal with various issues across the world in the name of Scavendom, and going out and just getting involved in shenanigans. The big thing that I would love to see Thanquol have, but might be a little tricky to accomplish, is that there should be failure states for what he does. So, like, you should be given missions that have a timer, and your goal is to do as much of them as possible, but, like, they should be fairly difficult to do. And it's, like, the amount of stuff you get done, you get cool kinds of rewards. Because the thing about Thanquol is Thanquol falls upwards, so he fails at a lot of things he tries to do, but it results in him succeeding in ways people don't expect. But I don't know. There's a lot of really fun different ways you could do it. I would probably lean into messing around with things based on his various misadventures. Because that's what people love about Thanquol, is his stories. Beyond that, how should he work in battle? If they use end times Thanquol, which I'm 99% sure they're going to, he should be a fairly powerful wizard that has the ability to cast from all 3 Skaven lores, like a mixture of spells, who's probably just not that good in combat at all at the start, but is able to be very, very survivable. He should be very survivable. If they make it truly like his tabletop version, it would be really fun to see him have an ability where he can pass on damage to nearby units, because that's how his system worked in tabletop, was that when you would deal damage to Thanquol, he would roll a dice, and on a 4+, he would pass the damage to somebody standing close to him. So it would be a fun system of that, you know, as long as he's surrounded by friendly units, he's able to highly mitigate the damage he takes by dealing it to the units around him that are friendly. I think that would be hilarious, but it depends on whether or not they can make that fun to use, because obviously if it's not enjoyable to use and it makes it where all you have to do is like target Thanquol and you just kill his army because they just happen to be standing near him, that would not be very enjoyable for the player, in which case you should probably just make it a regular ward save and just move on. But he should basically just be a very durable Gracier at the start, and then once you unlock Bone Ripper as a mount, and you get yourself a gigantic Rat Ogre that has a Warp Fire throwing attack, and also big Warp Fire braziers that smashes people around, then he becomes a powerful Skaven legendary lord that's capable of magic that also rides a monstrous mount, which would already make him very unique. But hopefully he just has lots of fun little shenanigans. Michael Estopinol. I can't find good info on the Iron Hammer, Belegar's hammer. It's the symbol of his clan in Total War, at least. I thought there would be more on the lore. So there's not a lot about it. It's talked about mostly in the army books, when you have like the description of it. And if you go check out my video on Belegar, I talk about it in a bit, but I talk about it a fair bit. Overall, it boils down to the Iron Hammer is a very, very powerful runic hammer that was created in Carrigate Peaks and is associated with the Engren clan, and it is a symbol of their clan, because every king of the Engren clan, every lord of the Engren clan has wielded it. So it is passed down from father to son, and it's just a really cool rune hammer that it's one-handed, or intended to be wielded one-handed. If you go watch the video I made on Belegar, you skip to the equipment section where I talk about it. You can I talk about what runes are likely on it, but the big thing is that it allows Belegar to swing it like freakishly fast, because it has the rune of Always Strike First, which I can't remember what that rune's called, but it's got some really nifty master runes on it. And it's a cool kick-ass hammer. But the basic, it doesn't have that complex of a story, because it's basically an ancestral heirloom that also hurts. But anyway, yeah. Biofoot78, good morning. Got an AOS game, so I'll watch the playback. Please carry your best wishes to Andy. I hope glad he's on the road to recovery. Ask you anything. Favorite geographic place in Age of Sigmar? I don't know if this counts, but I'm going to pretend it does, because it is technically a place. But I would say that my favorite place in Age of Sigmar is Lord Croak's ship. Oh god, I can't remember his full name, but it's something. Because the temple cities of the Lizardmen got turned into like full giganta uber city, like full the entirety of New York City plus sized flying cities that are purely Lizardmen Old One architecture and have a lot of really, really cool notes and tidbits about them. And Games Workshop, unfortunately, has wanted to keep them fairly mysterious, so it doesn't actually explore them that well and leaves a lot of it up to your imagination. I would really love to have them release like a book that details one of the temple ships and just gives like a full breakdown of everything in it. But I love those things. I love them a lot. Initially, obviously, I hated them when they were first introduced in the end times, because it felt like they came out of nowhere. But in Age of Sigmar, they have a much better, fun, established lore and they've shown up and done a lot of really cool things, and I'm super fond of them because they're actually really dangerous and mysterious, and they're like a really fun mix of like lost ancient technology of gods plus sci-fi, but with a lot of really cool fantasy tropes, with a lot of that keeping on that like those design elements of the lizardmen that we all know and love that, you know, are very heavily inspired by things that you would see from a very loose, distant view of Incan and like Mayan, Aztec architecture, and they're super cool. I like them a lot. Can I solve this equation? Nope. I'm not even gonna look at it. I don't do math anymore. I'm out of school. I don't have to do math. I refuse. Is there anything interesting to know about the Southern Chaos Waste? Not a lot, Mark. It got featured very heavily in the Archaon series and has basically never been touched since. And it's basically just a big hellscape full of demons and beastmen, and maybe like primordial other things. Like we know, so the big things, we know that the Warpfire dragons are from the Southern Chaos Waste. That is where they're from. So you got the Warpfire dragons, which are easily one of the most dangerous dragon species ever. You've got beastmen out the ass, just so many beastmen. And there is a demon empire. So there's a bunch of like grand citadels and structures that have been built because like the realm of chaos is just bleeding out. So there's a bunch of demons that hold court and rule that land when you actually start entering the realm of chaos proper. And the most famous, of course, being Agramon, I think his name was, who is the demon prince that had a grand bestiary. He had like a big, he had all these cages full of like creatures from different realities and all sorts of bizarre, monstrous things. And that's where he kept Dorger, the seed of the apocalypse. He kept him in prison there as a pet, his menagerie. And that's where Archaon journeyed to free Dorger, and he went on later to duel Agramon and kill him, as much as you can kill a demon prince. And it was a big, epic moment, because that was Archaon getting hold of the third treasure of chaos, if I recall correctly. Because that, see, he got the Mark of Undivided, he had the Armor of Morkar. No, he already had the Eye of Shirian, so no, that was his fourth treasure, I think. Yes, because yeah, that was the fourth treasure, was Dorger. So yeah. Which human character would be the best worker in a demolition company? Thyrus Gorman. Thyrus Gorman, the patriarch of the Bright College and the supreme patriarch before Gelt. He would be amazing at demolition because he would just burn and explode fucking everything. Everything. Though you could argue Gelt. If you wanted it more structured, and like less kaboom, you'd probably want to go with Gelt. If you're more like going like, I just want to demolish as much as humanly possible, then I think Thyrus Gorman would be your man. Chev Chelios. Hey, Sotek, Liver Conte, is there any lore stories about named Bloodthirsters other than Scarbrand? Yes. Yes. There's a lot of Bloodthirsters that have names. It's difficult to get more detailed than that because none of them show up like in multiple stories. They tend to show up for the book they were written for, and then they are never seen again. Is generally how they're treated. So, like, just some random examples. There is a Bloodthirster who popped up in... Oh god, I don't remember their names. I'm just gonna tell you their stories, because their names are like a bunch of syllables a lot of the time, and I can't remember that off the top of my head. But there's one Bloodthirster who got kind of famous, or infamous, because he showed up in, I think it was the Badlands? It was either the Badlands or the Chaos Waste. Or maybe the Darklands. No, it was either the Badlands or the Chaos Waste. But there was a Bloodthirster who popped up, and he ends up killing like a fuck ton of people. And he builds his own throne made out of skulls to sit on, to like talk about how awesome he is, and like, look at all these people I murdered. So he does this, he builds this whole big pyramid of skulls, And just as he's about to put the last skull on so that he can sit on it and crow about how awesome he is, Khorne, the god, picks up a skull from his own room or throne and throws it so it goes through the realm of chaos into the material realm, and it comes down like a meteor and just obliterates this pyramid of skulls. Just fucking obliterates it. That demon, that Bloodthirster and his entire army just gets wiped from the face of the earth. Because Khorne was like, you fucking little bitch. And just chucked a skull at him. Which is great. There's another Bloodthirster who has a really cool story about dueling an ogre tyrant. So there was this ogre tyrant who was really big, awesome, and powerful, that lived in the Mountains of Morn. And eventually he gets the attention of a Bloodthirster. So a big army of demons comes pouring out from the realm of chaos and attacks his tribe. And this tyrant has this big, epic fucking duel against this Bloodthirster, and we don't know who won. Because as they were fighting, the fury of their battle and the big epic conflict of all of these demons versus all these ogres caused like basically an earthquake, and the mountains above them collapse, and this big avalanche just falls on top of all of them. So it's unknown if either of them died, or possibly to this day, many years later, they're still fighting buried beneath this fallen mountain. But that one's fun. Probably the most famous story actually, I'll give you two more. And then we gotta move on. If you read Bruner the Bounty Hunter, there is a Bloodthirster that shows up in that book who is very weird. He's very weird. Like, when you think Bloodthirster, you are not thinking of this thing. Because it's almost more like a skeletal reaper, where it's like mostly just like bloody bones with like gore dripping off of it. It has like a big scythe. I'm not gonna go any more detailed than that because I think it's better to read the books. But if you want to see a very unique version of a Bloodthirster, the Mardag, go check out Bruner the Bounty Hunter. And then the last one that I think is worth mentioning is that there were two Bloodthirsters that wanted to have a contest to prove which of them was greater. And because they're assholes, instead of having it, instead of following the law of Goku where they fight like not in a populated area, or whichever anime characters like are better about that, where they're like, oh, we should move, or like Superman, right? It's like we should move this fight to where there's not civilians. The Bloodthirsters, being douchebags, were like, how about we go into the mortal realms and we go to Bretonnia and we have this fight like at a castle. So, because they're just assholes. So they start fighting in Bretonnia, and you have like these big demonic legions and these two Bloodthirsters fighting each other. And Bretonians are like, oh my fucking god, like Jesus Christ. And so the Bretonians mount like a really epic battle to try and bring them down. And the Bretonians get massacred. Absolutely massacred. But the Duke that was leading them, his horse panicked at the sight of like all these demons and ran off the battlefield, with him just being like furious the entire time. So he finally gets his horse back under control, and he rides back to the battlefield and sees everybody's dead. And basically all that's left are these two Bloodthirsters just beating the shit out of each other. And this Bretonnia Duke gets so overcome with rage that he charges into the battle, and he kills both Bloodthirsters. Because he was just done with everything. He was just that angry. So he goes in, he kills both of them, and Khorne is so pleased that Khorne basically grabs him and pulls him into the realm of chaos, and pulls him into the realm of Khorne, and ascends him to becoming a demon prince. And he becomes a really big, scary, big bad. So there you go. And then, of course, can't forget the unnamed kick-ass Bloodthirster who shows up in Gotrek and Phoenix Demon Slayer. That Bloodthirster is awesome, especially because he makes a return appearance in the finale of the Gotrek and Felix series. All right, Turkmeister. Been listening to the Gotrek and Felix novels, and Giant Slayer Teclis rides a griffin, and doesn't seem to cause him pain. Is this where a writer didn't get a character theme right, or because his physical condition was made worse in the lore? So, Tuckmeister, so I could be misremembering a little bit, but in that book, if I recall correctly, he uses magic to sort of like get the beast to be like chill, and Teclis does not particularly enjoy it. Teclis rides on a couple of creatures in different books. There's one book, I can't remember which book it is, but there's a story where he rides on a Pegasus very briefly. And then, of course, there's that Griffin scene from Giant Slayer. But Teclis is... I don't think it's a bad scene. It's just not Teclis's preference. He uses the Griffin not to ride into battle, but to get him to a place he needs to be very quickly. And the second he no longer requires the Griffin, he's out of there. He's like, nope, not doing that anymore. And just like walks through the path of the old ones instead. And the bigger thing is that if you read a lot of stories that involve Teclis, from the army books to the various novels like the Sons of Aurelian series or the Tyrion Teclis series and stuff like that, Teclis has a very, very iconic move. It's like his... You know how anime characters have like an ability or an attack they'll use where they have like a name for it and they do this whole goofy ass thing and you're like, oh, it's the signature move. Teclis has a signature move. And Teclis's signature move is that he casts a spell that literally lets him walk on air, and he just walks like up a flight of invisible stairs until he's like looking over the battlefield and he's like standing way, way up in the air on nothing. And he casts like god tier spells and just obliterates everything in front of him. That is like his thing, is that he walks up into the sky and he just looks like a little guy standing up there in the sky, and he just starts throwing spells in everybody's faces. And that's his signature move. And the moment you put him on a mount, he can't do that anymore. And it also just doesn't fit his character that well. I don't think it's that big of a deal to have him do it in stories, especially when it's for travel purposes. Like, he's like, oh, I need to travel from point A to point B, and it's many, many miles, so I'm going to use a mount to get me there as quickly as possible. I think that's fine for Teclis. The moment you say, oh, Teclis is going to ride an Arcane Phoenix or a horse into battle, I would say that's fucking stupid. And Teclis would never do that, because that would just not be his element. And he's way too frail for that, because riding a living, breathing creature that is much bigger than you into battle and fighting people while simultaneously casting magic and controlling this creature is very difficult physically. That is a very, very difficult thing to do. And Teclis should not be doing it, because it's fucking Teclis. He's toughness 2. He's toughness 2. Teclis is like made of paper mache. He would not do that. It's just not something he would do. I don't think he would ride a chariot. I don't think he would ride a horse. I don't think he would ride a griffin or a phoenix or any of that shit. I just don't think he would do that, because it would just be way too dangerous for him. And it's unnecessary danger. And it also just changes the way he is portrayed. And I don't like it. So, obviously, someone at Games Workshop or Creative Assembly disagreed with that. And so we have what we have. But, there you go. Gun for Bullets. Recently finished the Wulfric Warhammer Heroes book. I was wondering if there was an actual way to remove the curse the gods placed on him. Nope. Because the Dark Gods are assholes. And Wulfric does not worship any other major god powers. It would take a god to remove that curse. It would take a god of notable power to remove that curse. And Wulfric would never accept that. It would need like Sigmar, Ulrich, like somebody big and powerful to remove such a curse from him. And Wulfric is not ever willing to submit to a force like that. So the only gods he worships are the Dark Gods, and they would never remove that curse because they're assholes. That's not how they do. Once they infect you with a curse, you're donezo. You're donezo. Joel Martin. Why does CA reuse monikers like Eltharion, Volkmar, Crag the Grim, Archon the Black, Zatan, Krakenrock the Black, Zatan the Black, Scrag, Azhag, and Mishka the Slaughterer? So it's not Creative Assembly, it's Games Workshop. Creative Assembly is just the video game company. Games Workshop is the actual IP holder for Warhammer Fantasy. Why does Games Workshop reuse monikers? The reason is because, how do I say this? They think it sounds cool. They don't tend to be super creative a lot of the time. And they do not reuse monikers in the same book. And if you go back in the day, a lot of the times when these characters were created, they were created by different authors, different writers, because Games Workshop is not like Lord of the Rings or any other fantasy series pretty much out there, in that it's almost more like the SCP universe than it is a traditional universe that was created by a writer, because it was created by lots of different writers over the course of many, many years. Because of that, you'll have somebody that goes, ooh, the Grim, that's a cool hard name, I'm gonna use that. And he wrote Eltharion. And then you have a different guy that goes, Volkmar the Grim, that sounds fucking hard, I'm gonna do that. And then you have another guy that goes, Crag the Grim, that's a good dwarf name, I'm gonna use that. So you have different people who think something sounds cool, and they're not double checking each other's work, and it results in a lot of characters having the same moniker. However, my note to that would be that in real life, there are a lot of people from different cultures that use the exact same title or the exact same moniker because they sound cool. That's just how that's just how people work. Where there are a lot of the greats in the world, or the whatevers. Like, it just happens. And so do I believe that multiple people in the Warhammer world would have similar monikers because they're in different cultures? Yeah, absolutely. I think that would probably happen a lot. So I don't think it's actually that big of a deal. When you're looking at it from like a very outside perspective, you go, oh, well, that's kind of dumb. Why do they all have the same like moniker? And it's just because people are lazy, both in universe and out universe. So I think it's actually completely reasonable. Yeah. Okay, let me get caught up on these Twitch ones real quick. Yotam, what is the status of concept of gender roles in Old World Bretonnia? I know that officially recognized female knights have been retconned into the existence, but I wonder if that is super common or rare, and if other aspects of gender roles in their society has been changed. So, Yotam, the official answer to that is if you go read the Old World Big Blue Book, or the core rulebook, in addition to the Forces of Order rulebook, in addition to, or Forces of Good? I forget what it's called. In addition to the Bretonnian Arcane Journal. The answer to your question is that Bretonnia has a significantly less sexist society than it used to. It still is sexist, but though it also goes both ways, where men are not allowed to be wizards. You know, they're taken as children and either killed or made into a group of super elite god tier soldiers that serve the Lady of the Lake directly, but they will never know freedom or a life and live only to serve her as her personal troops. And they are, you know, they're basically dead. You could treat them as dead. But in the same breath, we do not have a ton of evidence that there has ever been like a queen of Bretonnia who was just as powerful and wielded as much authority as a king of Bretonnia. Not that I've ever seen. However, we do have evidence that there have been dukes that are women. A perfect example, of course, being good old Rapunzel de Leonis. And now female knights are just common. They are not that exceptional. They are not particularly rare. There are Lady Grail Knights, there are Lady Questing Knights, there are Lady Knights of the Realm, and there are Lady Knights Errant. And there are notes about how when a man or woman is born into a family that has the capability of becoming knights, that they go through all the proper training to be knights. You see actually a similar thing in the Tomb King book, if you read the Tomb King Arcane Journal, it kind of goes out of its way to talk about Tomb Queens and Tomb Princesses having the exact same capabilities and the exact same political authority as their male counterparts. So it's just something that Games Workshop seems to be actually paying attention to now. I would still say that Bretonnia has gender roles, but there are significantly less of them, and now they are more due to more easily to point at circumstances. Whereas one of the things I always found really weird about the older Bretonnia sexism is that the old system there was no explanation to it. It was the reasoning was, well, in our world, in the real world, women would not be allowed to do XYZ. So in this fantasy setting that is not the real world, it would be the same, which doesn't make sense because that's not how that works. So the new lore basically is taking an approach of, okay, what would it might actually look like? And it's now less sexist, but there is still sexism. But it's like, they have the Lady of the Lake, who is a female god that is represented by an all-female order and has a female prophet that wield the most authority. The Fey Enchantress is the top dog. She has more power than the king. The prophetess, not the prophetess, the Fey Enchantress. The Fey Enchantress can walk into the throne room and say, fuck that king, he sucks, get him out of here. And she has ultimate authority. And basically the old world has gone in and smoothed out various lines by getting rid of some of the real world realism that accidentally snuck in, that shouldn't have been there to begin with. So hopefully that answers your question. Darius Rose, when is my autobiography going to be released, as in the Queek video? Also, do you have a link where I could give suggestions for Wednesdays? There is no link for where suggestions could be other than on the Discord. You could put in the Lorebeards thread. As for Queek, I refuse to give a date, because if I give a date, then it's a promise, and then everyone will inevitably be disappointed or confused or whatever. But all I'll say for Queek is that you may have seen this on my Twitter, of that I have finished rereading almost everything I need to reread to finish it, because it had been, frankly, such a long time since I had read a number of books that I had forgotten a number of things. And so I'm making progress, which is good. I don't want to really commit to anything heavier than that, because I don't want to set anybody up for like disappointment. But I think we have 50 minutes of the history segment done, and then there's 2 other portions that are just done. So yeah, it's coming along. It's coming along. Living Legend, cheers to another month. I remember a story in AOS where the Lizardman actually brought down one of Tzeentch's silver towers. What's the whole deal behind that? That is from the Broken Realms storyline. Broken Realms, which was A tier. S tier. It was the campaign that carried us from 2nd edition Age of Sigmar to 3rd edition Age of Sigmar, and Broken Realms was a fucking amazing story. It was so good. It was so good. My only complaint is that it really seemed like it was supposed to be a 5-part series, and due to some things that were going on at Games Workshop at the time, they ended up cutting it down to a 4-part series, because Alariel should have had her own book, and she didn't, and it's due to some stuff that was happening in the background, with like shipping and printing and all this other shit. But overall, super good series. And one of the books features this big build-up. It's in Broken Realms Be'lakor, which is part 3. Yeah. So part 3, which is Be'lakor, features this like huge series of battles where one of the 9 silver towers of Tzeentch ends up being destroyed, which was fucking incredible, because that was like actual consequences, and it blew my mind, because something like that, normally Games Workshop never does that. They usually never tell stories that have consequences, the vast majority of all of their stories, nothing happens. Everybody wins, nobody dies, nothing of consequence happens. Okay. And that's the reason I like Age of Sigmar as much as I do. I know a lot of people don't like Age of Sigmar, but I'm deeply convinced that anybody that truly hates Age of Sigmar has just never read it. They've never read a single book. They just hear like the memes, and they hear other people complaining about it, and they're like, oh, well, that sounds dumb. I don't like that. That sounds dumb. And it's like, how about you fucking read a book instead of judging it based on nothing? But Broken Realms was fucking incredible. It was super good. Dawnbringers was also pretty good, which was the 3rd edition to 4th edition campaign. Dawnbringers was quite nice. Not as good, in my opinion. The starting phases were kind of but all of the short stories they added make it a massive, massive set of lore. It's really, really good. All right, I need to take a drink of water because I'm shouting. I need to talk softer. Okay, I'm gonna try and get through these really fast. Necromancer Cobalt, because a footnote is all they deserve, could you please footnote the Pygmies for me? Okay. So the Pygmies were a race that existed. The last time they were mentioned, I want to say, was 7th edition Warhammer Fantasy. But the Pygmies were a race of very small humanoids. They're not human. They're kind of like halflings. They're like an adjacent race. But the Pygmies were, well, depending on which author you ask. Some authors had them as just really small humans. Other authors said, no, they're more like halflings. But they were a very small race of human-like people that lived in the jungles of Lustria, and they were extremely primitive. They were very dark-skinned, and the art and minis that existed of them were very, very racist caricatures. They looked very much like really stereotypical racist iconography from like early 1900s America, like pre-civil rights movement, and it was really bad. But they were a really primitive race that lived in the jungles, and they were very physically weak and fragile because they were so small. So they relied on blowguns and blowpipes to do everything. Interestingly, the skinks that we have, like, you know, nowadays everyone associates skinks and chameleon skinks with blowpipes. The Pygmies were that before, because skinks didn't exist back then. Like the lizardmen were like an underground race of weird troglodyte creatures. Which, though, the troglodytes were technically a separate thing. But like the lizardmen and the troglodytes back in those editions of Warhammer were like an underground race. So the Pygmies were like really, really small, diminutive people that used blowpipes for everything. So they relied on blowpipes. They lived in like reed huts or like stilted buildings. And they had shamans. And they were really backwards. And some of them were cannibals. Yeah, they were really unfortunate. And Games Workshop kind of grew a little bit and turned around and looked at them and was like, yeah, no, let's just throw those in the dumpster and pretend they never happened. Because Games Workshop really buried the Pygmies going into 5th edition. I believe 5th edition was the last time they like really existed. 6th edition kind of mentions them, but by 6th edition they were like, no. So pretty much by like the late 90s, the Pygmies kind of got thrown into the... Actually, no. 5th edition would have been kind of the last time you would have seen them. Or 4th edition. So 5th edition was when Games Workshop was like, we're not comfortable with these. So yeah, that's what they were. Let's see. Andres Baranek, what can destroy Gromril? I heard the silly rats can make a gun out of a rusty pipe that is able to pierce Gromril. That's no. Why forge army for 50 years if rats can destroy it so easily? Makes Dawi look silly. So Gromril is star metal, right? It is, you could debate that it's metal forged from like old one destroyed tech, or that it's just like god tier exotic metal from beyond the stars. But it's a form of star metal. And Gromril, true Gromril, can resist most things. The only thing the Skaven can make that can pierce Gromril is warpstone bullets. But a warpstone bullet is a very unstable piece of ammunition that is literally dar or dark magic compressed into a physical form, put into a highly pressurized chamber, and fired at incredible velocity. And there is no armor that does not have some sort of magical element to it that can stop warpstone bullets. Nothing can. But it's also an extremely unstable form of ammunition that is very deadly to the wielder. And it's also prone to exploding. Like on tabletop, for instance, this obviously isn't represented in Total War, and a lot of authors are really shitty about representing this as well. Jezzails are very unstable weapons. Whenever you'd play with Jezzails in tabletop and you'd roll a hit, if you rolled any ones, you rolled those same dice again, and if you rolled another one, the Jezzail literally just blew up. It just exploded and the model died. So they were shockingly, like, they were more reliable than most Skaven weapons, but not by much. Because they misfire in a 1 in 6 chance. And then when they misfired, if you got anything other than a 1, they just didn't fire. But if you rolled another 1, they exploded. Which, that's still pretty terrifying odds. But that being said, the instant you smack any kind of half-decent rune onto Gromril, it can easily resist warpstone bullets as well. As for why make it, because Skaven warpstone bullets and stuff like that are not that old of a technology. So for the vast majority of the Dwarf Empire's existence, there was virtually nothing that could pierce Gromril with any form of reliability. I mean, Gromril can take a hit from a fucking giant, and it'll dent. But it has a fairly reasonable chance of turning aside the blow, which, I mean, think about that. Like, a creature that is so big that, I mean, a dwarf only goes up about to, like, a giant's, what, ankle bone? Maybe? Like, humans tend to go up to usually, like, their thigh or their, a lot of the time. Like, something that big picking up, like, a tree and hitting you with it, and you're able to pull up your shield, just be like, fuck, get parried, bitch. Like, ridiculous. But Gromril's just that tough. Hammond, how could Crimlo realistically be added to Warhammer 3? The most realistic way you would add Crimlo while keeping the character anywhere close to how he was depicted is you make him a skink. If Crimlo was a skink that was like a really small skink that spawned from a forgotten, long-lost spawning pool that was, like, within the city of Skeggy or, like, beneath the city of Skeggy. So this skink spawns from this long-forgotten primordial spawning pool, and he spawned alone, and he came up into the Norscan settlement, and the Norskins were like, oh my god, it's like a blessing from the gods! And they took him in as their own, and they raised him as one of their own. And he kinda sorta acclimated to Norscan culture and became like a skink chief and like fought alongside the Norskins, and like led their people and stuff. That would be Crimlo. That would be fulfilling the Grimlo storyline. He wouldn't be a Slann because it just wouldn't make sense with how the Slann have changed. But if you made him a skink, you could make it work. Or I mean, you could make it a Saurus or a Crocscore too if you really wanted. Darius Rose, if the Tong were written in a story, would they be on par with the Scaramorph at the end times? Also, for the Chaos Tribe composition, is it mostly Marauders, or do Chaos Warriors also operate in them? So Darius Rose, cool question. One thing that's cool is that in Warhammer the Old World, you can actually run a Chaos Tribe. Now, They're called the Wolves of the Sea, or Sea, I think is the new sub-faction type. And that's literally what they are. They're like one of the marauder tribes. That being said, would the Tong be on par with the Scaramore? Yes. Yeah, I would say they are. Yeah. The Tong were that scary. The Tong hunted the Kurgan, the Hung, like all of the really big, scary fucking tribes. The Tong hunted them. If anything, I would say the Tong were actually more successful than the Scaramore, because the Tong were around a long time ago, and they just kind of faded into myth, and based on how the timelines match up, it's very, in my personal opinion, it is the Tong who are responsible for isolating the Chaos Dwarves in Uzkalak from the rest of the Dwarf Empire, and leading to them becoming the Chaos Dwarves, where they surrounded them and there was no way out, other than digging down and finding Hashut. So yeah, Tong are pretty spooky. They're like one of the big bads. But yeah, I'd put them on par with the Scaramore. For Chaos tribe composition, is it mostly Marauders? Yes, it depends on the tribe. Some tribes do actually have a lot of Chaos Warriors among them, but most of the time, within the deeper lore, oftentimes when a character falls to Chaos to the extent that they become a Chaos Warrior, they usually leave their tribes. So they usually walk away from their tribe and they go join like a Chaos Warband, or they go on some quest somewhere or whatever, because they're a champion, right? They're no longer human, really. There's something more. So they usually leave behind their tribes because they are no longer appropriate for that kind of life. So generally speaking, when you're dealing with an actual Chaos tribe, there are very, 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 very few Chaos Warriors, if any, among them, being like characters that have actual Chaos armor. Now, so like when you're playing Norska in Total War Warhammer, I would say that's a very appropriate depiction. There's no Chaos Warriors, but there are a lot of really fucking scary people, and a lot of really fucking huge guys, and a lot of really nasty monsters, and creatures, and mutants. Those are all very, very likely. Now, there are some tribes where the Chaos Warriors will come back and visit them, because they have those family ties still, or there's some like reasoning behind it. A good example was the Chaos Lord, the Iron Reaver. Can't ever remember his fucking name. The Iron Reaver, who was one of the contenders to be ever chosen. He was a full-on Chaos Lord, but he loved his tribe. He loved his people. And when his people got wiped out, they got massacred. They got literally genocided by an Empire army from... Was it Ostland? I think it was Ostland. Wherever von Ralkov is the Electric Count. He took such offense to that because they were his people, they were his family, that he literally like organized a massive army and went down and killed Valmir von Ralkov's son to get revenge, and like burned down his family home and killed a shit ton of people. Peasant! You're a fucking peasant. So yeah, some very, very, very rarely are Chaos Warriors still tied to their tribes, but some are. Black Wolf 82. Can you talk a little bit about the Sky Titans and how the giants degraded after the fall? Yes, very briefly. The Sky Titans are a primordial, so they predate the old ones. They are a primordial race of Titanic creatures. I mean, they are so fucking big that they make giants look puny. Absolutely puny. They make bone grinder giants, which are very, very, very big giants, look small. The mega gargants of Age of Sigmar are small to them. They were colossal, but they were very isolationist. They did not like each other very much. They lived in these great castles that were on top of the mountains, the ancient giant lands. So the ancient giant lands had all these big old castles on the very, very toppest, highest peaks that were colossal and full of powerful technology, because the Sky Titans were incredible engineers, and they were also technomancers. So they were capable of using sorcery, and the devices that they created were also capable of sorcery, where they were known to use weapons that could unleash blizzards. The iron blasters that the ogres use, those were defense guns that the Sky Titans constructed and had on their castles that fired and were used to attack the ogres that were attacking them. They defended the castles of the Sky Titans. And it took tens of thousands of ogres swarming them to kill them. And it was one of them. Each Sky Titan, as an individual, was a, like, Dark Souls on cocaine tier boss against the ogres. Because the Sky Titans use sorcery, they use technology, and their prodigious size to kill tons of ogres. But they have to sleep eventually. They have to eat. They get tired. And they got overwhelmed. Each of them got overwhelmed one by one, because they never reinforced each other. The last Sky Titan, though, somehow used his various forms of engineering and sorcery to make his castle fly. So it became a flying castle in the sky, and it literally broke off from the mountain and soared off into the clouds. The ogres saw it. They've passed it down as a legend of the last Sky Titan, that he quite literally somehow engineered his castle to fly off into the clouds and was never seen again. Because he decided, fuck that shit. As for the degrading of the giants, basically the way it goes is that some of the Sky Titans survived enough that they had progeny, they had children, but their children were very, very few, and as their various castles fell, the Sky Titans' descendants were chased out of the mountains, because it was either be chased out and survive, or stay and die and be devoured by the ogres. So they fled into the wider world, and as they fled, they only very rarely bumped into one another, but all the ones that bumped into each other were very closely related. So as they continued to breed and have children, their children would get smaller with each successive generation due to inbreeding. They had severe inbreeding. So not only were their descendants getting smaller, but they also were kind of wrong. Like, their proportions were really off. Their limbs were either like too long or too short, or their hands were like swollen too large, and they're very like ungainly, ungraceful creatures that are in a lot of pain. One of the reasons that giants drink so much is to deal with the pain of just being alive, because they're so inbred that their very like structure of their bodies, their musculature, their skeletal structure is not correct, and it causes them severe constant pain. They have horrible chronic pain, and so they drink and get themselves really, really inebriated to keep that at bay. And they're most of them are very stupid creatures, and they're bullies that pick on, take what they want and don't give a shit about anything else. So yeah, their story is pretty sad. Not all of them are like that, though. There are some that are exceptions. And the Giants of Albion have fared much better than their cousins across the sea. All right, Elijah Snow. Hello, sir. Question: do you know if there are anyone other than Andy putting out quality Warhammer Fantasy roleplay Let's Plays? I liked your logging camp adventure, but I was curious who else might be out there. I love LAWhammer, but I'm playing The Enemy Within. Actually, good timing for that question. Elijah So there is a group, there's a YouTube channel called The Legends of Evantris, if I recall correctly. Hold on. I can't ever remember. Legends of... What? Yeah, Legends of Avantris. Gigantic fucking YouTube channel. They got like 1.5 million subs. They do a lot of D&D stuff. Awesome guys. They're super duper awesome. I love them. Check them out if you haven't. They are going to do some WFRP stuff in the future. If you're on their Patreon, you can actually check out them learning the system. They've been doing some streams about that, so I would check them out. But outside of that, unfortunately, no, I don't know any people into it. I would really like to do another streamed campaign, but if I streamed another campaign, I would definitely make my own. I wouldn't do Enemy Within. I would do a homebrew. Because I honestly have more fun with homebrew because I don't have to constantly fucking check books. I can just let my imagination do what it does best. But I'd like to do another campaign at some point, but it would be something fresh. Anyway, Crow 312. I feel like the Strigoi bloodline always gets shafted in the lore. Why is everyone trying so hard to get rid of them? Am I crazy, or do the lore suggest they're bullied? I feel like they have so much potential. So, in answer to your question, you're correct. They are bullied. They're very bullied, but there's a reason they're bullied. The Strigoi bloodline are the descendants of Ushorin, the Master of Masks, and the big, nasty, big, beefy boy among the founding vampires. And after the fall of Lamia, when the vampires, after Nagash dies, and the vampires scatter, a lot of them really weren't sure what to do with themselves, and most of them went off into the wilderness and just tried to survive. Ushorin was different. Ushorin, who up until that point had been a very petulant man-child, who was very envious of his sister, and he was the only one not given vampiric ascension by drinking from Neferata's elixir of tainted life. Ushorin stole it, because he was Neferata's little brother, and he was envious, and he wanted to be in the Cool Kids Club and be immortal and everything, so he snuck in and drank from it, and Neferata was fucking furious. She hated her brother. In any event, after Nagash dies, most of the vampires scattered to the wilds, but Ushorin grew up, is the best way I can explain it. Ushorin looked back at what happened to Lamia, and he came to the idea that they had fucked up. That the reason Lamia had failed was not because vampires could not have a successful empire, but because the vampires of Lamia did not follow a good set of laws. Because the vampire Abarash, who is the founder of the Blood Dragons bloodline, he had attempted to establish a set of laws for the vampires to follow, where it was like, hey, we should only drink from criminals, we shouldn't just feed on regular people, we should be pretty strict about who gets the blood kiss, we need to have really specific laws in place to protect ourselves and to protect our people. And the vampires of Lamia fell to decadence, and they fucked up big time. And so Nehakara noticed them and kicked their shit in pretty hard. So what happened with Ushorin is he decided to try again. And he wandered into what we now know as the Marshes of Madness, though they were not the Marshes of Madness back then. The things were not nearly as bad. It was a much more easy to live place. Harsh, but livable. He found the ancient empire of Morcaine. And he went to the capital city, where he encountered the necromancer Caden, who had the crown of Nagash. Because Caden, who you may know from the transformation of Caden, being a really, really powerful shaman and wizard in his own right, he's like one of the best beast wizards that humanity has ever produced. Caden had found the crown of Nagash on the corpse of King Alcatazar, who had fallen into a river near Nagashazar, and his corpse, clutching the crown of Nagash, had been carried by the river until it washed up in the Badlands, where it was found by Caden, and Caden buried Alcatazar there and founded a capital city, and he put on the crown of Nagash, and it started to influence him and mess with him. But he was building a great empire, building the city of Morgheim. And this led to the founding of like the Morcane and everything, and Ushoran shows up and realizes what's going on and thinks, oh, I could take advantage of this. I could make something good here. And so he assassinates Caden, and he reorganizes that empire into the Empire of Strigos. And the Empire of Strigos was a nation that had vampires at its peak, but the vampires had to follow a really strict set of laws where they were only allowed to feed on criminals. They protected the nation from outside threats. They kicked the shit out of the Greenskins, and they forced the Greenskins out of the Badlands. And they had a good thing going. And Ushoran, realizing that he had created a functioning, stable empire that was holding out, that was dealing with all of its threats, was doing a really good job, and vampires were out in the open. They weren't hiding. They were the open rulers of this land, and the people loved them for the most part. You know, they were scared of them in some ways, but they did, overall, they were well liked. And Ushoran had a genuinely good thing going. And so Ushoran turned to the other vampires and he said, hey, I've got this awesome empire going. It's like Lamia, but better. You guys should come hang out. You guys, you should join me. And this was not very well received by the other vampiric bloodlines, because what they saw was arrogance. What they saw was Ushoran saying, hey, you guys all fucked up Lamia. Y'all are a bunch of losers. I figured it out. I'm better than you, and I've actually made a functioning empire. So how about you guys come serve me instead? Also, by the way, I have the crown of Nagash. And it led to a lot of really ugly feelings of resentment between the other bloodlines and the Strigos. And the Strigoi bloodline were very, very proud of who they were. So, bunch of shit happens. Neferata goes about, basically, like, convincing a bunch of human tribes to attack him from the north. And simultaneously, Neferata also starts manipulating the Greenskins in the Darklands to build up into a Wa, and they come crashing from the east. And Ushoran's empire gets overwhelmed and destroyed. And when Ushoran dies, and his empire falls, his vampiric children scatter. And because of their relationship with the other vampires, when they go to the other groups of vampires and are like, hey, like, we're in trouble, we need help, they get rejected by all of them for different reasons. The blood dragons hunt them for sport, seeing them as like the ultimate hunt and the ultimate challenge, especially because the vampires of the Strigos bloodline tend to be rather bestial and very large and physically imposing. So the blood dragons hunted them. The Lamians hated them because Neferata hates them as being extensions of her brother. So the Lamians would purposely expose them anywhere they went. So they would expose them to witch hunters or other humans. Not witch hunters, but like people that were of that mindset. So they would expose them constantly. So they were always on the run. They tried to hang out with Vlad and Kislev, and Vlad kicked them out and was like, fuck you guys, I can tell y'all are going to mess things up because there's something wrong. Vlad knew that they were slowly going mad, and he could sense it, and he was like, nah, I'm not dealing with this shit, like, get out. So Vlad killed a bunch of them, kicked them out. And then the Necrarchs, if they tried to appeal to Necrarchs would capture them and experiment on them and use them as test subjects. So they were left with no allies, and the blood dragons actively hunting them, the Lamians exposing them whenever they tried to set up near a human settlement, so they had to go into hiding. And to go into hiding, they had to resort to feeding on the blood of already dead people. So like the congealed blood found within corpses. Living on the absolute fringes of society, or feasting on like animals or chaos creatures and all this stuff. And this led to them devolving and basically almost as a species going completely batshit insane. And because of the quality of their bloodline from Ushoran's madness started to present. And it led to many of them becoming more bestial, more hulking monstrosities, where even if they were very intelligent, they were hideous to look at. Gashnag the Black Gashnag the Black Prince out of the Border Princes is a really good example of that. He's very mentally sound, He's a very considerate, good-hearted ruler. He's hideous. Hideous. Here, I can actually pull up a picture of him. He is not pretty to look at. Here he is. So this is Gashdak. He is pretty, he's not the prettiest thing to look at. But he actually protects his people and tries to do his best. But yeah, he's, you know, he stands out in a crowd. Put it that way. Black Wolf, thank you for the 3 months. Appreciate that. Jaguar Philosopher, Slaanesh unit predictions for DLC. Off the top of my head, Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Slaanesh, Chaos Exalted Hero of Slaanesh for the generic characters, Dakala for the Legendary Lord, and then I would do Steercar as a legendary... No, sorry. I would do... Yeah, no, that's right, actually. I would do Steercar for a legendary hero. I would do the Mask as a free LC legendary lord. And then I would do... like, Exalted... I don't know what you would call them. But, like, Exalted... or greater writers of... Greater Chaos Knights or Pleasure... You'd have to think of a name. But basically, monstrous cavalry Slaanesh Chaos Knights. Which, if you go look up Steercar... Here, I can just show you. Steercar of the Sortsvinar rides a big old boob snake. The boob snake, which is a pretty iconic mini. This is a chaos steed. This is a demonic steed of Slaanesh. Obviously, they would have to edit the model a little bit to get rid of the titties, or to cover up the titties. But technically, they are demonic steeds of Slaanesh. Some people call them greater steeds of Slaanesh or exalted steeds of Slaanesh. But I would have this be a cavalry unit. This would be like your equivalent to Skull Crushers or Doom Knights and all those guys. But I'd have these guys. Then I would have the Anointed, which the Anointed of Slaanesh should be Elves. So I would make them like aspiring champions. So they would be the equivalent to aspiring champions for Undivided, or the Wrathmongers for Khorne, or the Putrid Blight Kings for Nurgle, where they're like a really small number of guys that are like super fucking elite. And they should be these elves that either have like all ebony or like, I would probably have them have ebony skin to really make them stand out among elves. But these elves that are like super freaky looking because they're ancient. They date back to the Cataclysm, and they are elves that have completely and utterly sold themselves to Slaanesh. And they are so powerful that they wield the power of demons. They're not demons, but they're as powerful as like really, really scary demons. And there's not a lot of them, so I would have them be the equivalent of that. So there's like 12 of them in a unit, and they just kick ass and take names. Then I would do Slaangors, obviously. So Slaangors, which are the beastmen of Slaanesh. There's a lot of different ways you could do them, but Slaangors. Then I would do... oh gosh. I used to have this ready to fire from the hip. Oh, the Basilisk. I would do the Basilisk from the Monstrous Arcanum. So a big 8-legged horrifying giant lizard monster that has a gaze attack that causes people to just like melt into like radioactive ooze. Great, cool, awesome. So I do a Basilisk. And then for the last thing... I don't know what I do for the last unit off the top of my head. I feel like there's another unit I'm forgetting. There's a unit I'm forgetting. Because I have a list written somewhere. So, I don't know. Probably some new demon unit. Alright, anyway, moving on. So then we've got Spellbound. Thank you very much for the super chat. Hey, so Tech wanted to ask about demon princes. What's their jam? How do they differ from greater demons beyond the greater ease of staying on the material? So demon princes are very specifically, they are mortals that have ascended to demonhood. So it is a mortal being, not necessarily human, but usually human, that has garnered enough power or affluence with, or influence with the dark god, that they have ascended to demonhood, and they are on par, if not above, greater demons. Demon princes are they're motherfucking scary. Super big bads. Their powers are very bizarre. They have very unique, iconic designs. Every demon prince is different. But the thing that makes them particularly scary is that they have a very good understanding of the mortal realm, because they're from it. They're from reality. They're from the mortal realms. They understand how it works. They understand how people work in ways that greater demons just don't. Because greater demons are purely etheric entities that were created from their gods or from other little offshoot type things. They have no concept or understanding of the mortal realms until they're in it. And the mortal realms are very strange to demons. Because there are a lot of rules and laws here that don't exist in the ether, like time. Or space, like distance between things. And that can make reality very confusing for demons. Demon princes do not have that problem. And that makes them extra super fucking scary because they know what they're doing. Generally speaking, a demon prince is the most dangerous thing there is. Like, the vast majority of demon princes are considered to be higher than greater demons. I'll put it that way. Not always. And demon princes don't tend to get talked about necessarily a lot. But that's probably the best rule of thumb I'd say for that. Baron von Bastard. Which two characters fighting would cause the most collateral damage? Collateral damage. Probably something like Scarbrand and Kolek Suneater, because they're both big kaiju guys that would just be like beating the shit out of each other. And they both would be very... They're both so big and strong, it takes a lot to kill them. And they would just be like tearing everything up as they're like fighting around. You could argue wizards, but wizard duels can be a little because oftentimes when you have two big wizard characters fighting each other, it often results in they're dispelling so much, like they're counteracting one another's magic so much that sometimes the battle is not as cataclysmic as you might expect it to be. But sometimes they start reaching so deeply for certain kinds of magics that the result of them fighting does cause absolute cataclysms. So if you want to talk about like wizard fights spilling out of control, it'd probably be something like Lord Mazdamundi versus Kairos Fate Weaver. That would be, I would not want to be anywhere near that. I would not want to be anywhere near that. Serpanza, do your actions please gods with overlapping domains? How many gods get off simultaneously when I stab someone in war? Do your actions please overlapping gods? Yes. I would say so, yes. Unless you are dedicating those actions to a specific god, in which case usually there seems to be some kind of system that kicks into place at times. But that's not necessarily guaranteed. I would say generally yes. That gods will be pleased about what you're doing, even if you're not doing it for them. So, you know, you're doing something for Sigmar by taking your big ol' hammer and, like, braining the fuck out of a bunch of beastmen. Korn is looking at that and is like, yeah, that's good shit. That's good shit right there. So, but how many gods when you stab someone in war? It depends how you stab them. Like, how did you stab them? Did you catch them by surprise? Was it like an epic confrontation? Was it you brutally massacring someone significantly weaker than you? Was it you standing up against a tyrant and winning by raising up your, using your spear very cleverly in a way that caught him off guard and you defeated a foe far stronger than you? It depends. But the answer is a lot. Darius Rose, for Gores, do they get bigger like orcs as they so advance? Since there are beast lords like Gothor and Gargarak that are as big as a minotaur in terms of height, or are they just born big? They're just born big. Beastmen are more akin to people. That being said, if a beastman is doing particularly well and gets the gaze of the gods upon him, he might swell with unholy power, right? The gods might gift him with power that causes him to quite literally grow in size. So in that case, they can get bigger. But beastmen do not perpetually grow forever. No. They are much more like humans. They cap out at a point. But there are things, sorcery things, magical item things, blessings of the gods things, mutation things, that can cause them to get bigger. But generally speaking, it's just genetics. A good example is Kazrak the One-Eye is a very, very powerful, heavily lauded, kick-ass champion. He's not that big. Kazrak's relatively small. Like, he's not tiny by any means. You know, he's, like, slightly above average. But he's not, like, a towering colossus by any means of the imagination. Jonathan Scott, what are your feelings on the Witch Hunter trilogy? So, the Matthias Thulman trilogy, I have it right there. I've actually never read it. Every time I try to read it, I end up getting distracted by something else. And that, like, I never opened it and read it. Because every time I'm like, oh, I need to read this, my brain will go, oh shit, but this video's coming up and I need to read this. Or like, oh shit, I have this question, I need to read this. Or like, oh shit, this Lorebeards thing's coming up and I need to read this. So I haven't read it yet. It's sitting right there on my shelf. Between Undeath Ascendant and Malice Darkblade Volume 1. So I need to read it at some point, but I haven't read it yet. It's on my to-do list with many, many other things. Hammond, Teclis isn't saying, oh damn, I have toughness too, I can't do that in the middle of battle. In real life, even lowly humans can do some incredible things. I agree. However, what Teclis can say is, I should not get on this horse and ride it into battle because I don't have the proper training for that. I don't really know how to ride steeds that well. And I know that it's very exacting on my constitution. Now, if he's in a battle, like, that's happening around him, and he sees a horse, and he's like, man, I really need to get from where I am right now to over there, I should get on that horse and ride it over there, then yeah, sure, I can see him getting on a horse. But the odds of that coming up are very small, and Teclis is an elf that has very little experience riding on other creatures. Where if he looks at a horse, he's going to go, I don't fucking know how to ride that. I'm going to have to use a spell to keep it calm. And then I do not know what I'm going to do to get from point A to point B. Other than, like, go! And the steed is going to be far more prone to panic or being killed by some random arrow or other thing. Just like if I picked you up and I'm like, oh, you know what? You're in the middle of a battlefield. There's people fighting. Here's a car that has a standard. Have you ever driven standard? Well, you're in a life or death situation, so you better learn how to drive standard. And you're like, I don't fucking know what I'm doing. Well, maybe it'd be better to just walk or run, because you know how to do that. Warzags, Morky Mischief. You think that Nagash could have claimed the throne of chaos and become chaos incarnate like he was planning to do in fantasy? That's not... No. I don't know. I don't think Nagash would do that, because taking the throne of chaos would require being subservient to the powers of chaos. It's relying upon and being subservient to the dark gods so that they gift you with power and influence. Nagash, I do not think, would want anything to do with that. I think he would hate that so much. He would never. He's too arrogant. And Nagash has always sought to become a god from his own ability, his own strength. He hates gods. He hates them. I don't think he would ever... The only thing Nagash, I think, would ever try to do with the Throne of Chaos is destroy it or try to figure out if there was some way that he could use a ritual to like steal the power that it would grant and use it for something else. Laughing God, how likely do you think it is that Wood Elves, and more specifically Orion, will do more stuff in the old world? I hope they remember he's a godly avatar. I would say it's very likely. I would say it's very likely because every single arcane journal has a campaign that talks about what is that race up to right now. So like Bretonnia is currently prepping their defenses in the Border Princes and in Bretonnia proper to fight back against Cetra the Imperishable. Cetra is currently sending out an invasion force north to reclaim the remains of his right-hand girl, one of his generals, a tomb queen who got killed, to get her back from a greenskin tribe that captured her remains around the Dragonback Mountains. And he's also preparing his navy to invade Bretonnia. The Greenskins are doing a lot of things, but the main campaign focus for them is they have a WA that has been declared from the Grey Mountains under WA Spinecracker, I think, the war boss there, and he's attacking Bretonnia and is very possibly going to kill the king. Either Cetra's going to kill the king or that orc war boss is going to kill the king. I personally hope Cetra kills him because that would be fucking awesome. I would love to see Cetra kill King Lewin Orcslayer. I think that would be top tier. But they're building up events, and we know that the Dwarf book is about the dwarfs launching a new expedition to reclaim Carrick 8 Peaks, which they've done a lot of, but this is yet another one. And I don't actually know what the Chaos one is yet. So do I think the Wood Elves are going to be busy? Yeah, I think so. Sean Schultz, do you think the Amazons will come back? Yes. Yes, I 100% think the Amazons will return. Captain Magma, who is the mostly purely heroic character without any strings attached? I imagine Superman's moral compass. Ooh, that's hard. Who is the most, like, good guy? That's tough. Because Warhammer doesn't really allow those characters to live for long. The character that I would say is like a good person. Just a good person who's trying to do the right thing at all times, honestly, is probably Vultan. But Vultan's also very young. Y'all think Felix? Felix? Yeah, I could see it. Felix definitely has, like, I don't know. Felix does have strings attached. Like, Felix struggles morally with certain concepts around women, mainly. He has lady problems. I would say probably the most good-natured person who tries to do the right thing their entire life, and we don't really see anything that looks like anything close to a compromised moral compass with strings attached would be Vultan. And it's mostly because he's so young. Because, to be frank, if anyone lives for long enough, there will be strings attached. Yeah, that's probably what I would say. Though I fucking love Superman. Superman's awesome. I would love... I mean, I actually think Vultan is pretty close to a Superman type figure. To be completely honest. But it's also why he is doomed to die. Like, Vultan's story ends with his death. In every alternate universe that he shows up in, he always will die. Because of who he is. And because of what he represents. Like, he's literally too good for the world. David Molinio. First live stream. Well, I'm so glad you could make it. I devoured the old Lorebeards videos and started doing Warhammer artworks. Is there a way to show you to have the Loremaster feedback? Yes, David. So on my Discord channel, there's a Lorebeards fan art thread. And if you want to submit it in there, I will 100% always take a look at anyone that posts anything in there. Or if you want, you can always post it on Twitter, and you can @LAWhammer and @Loremaster of Sotek, and we would, of course, be delighted to take a look at it as well. We're both relatively active on Twitter. All right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny. If you had asked me like the Superman-y type question, like before the end times, a part of me would have wanted to say like Tyrion, but Tyrion's also doomed to fall to his rage, unfortunately for him. Like that is how his story is destined to end, is that him losing himself to the curse of Cain. It's interesting. Yeah, I know. You know what? You know who's a good boy? Nah, it finally occurred to me. You know who's a fucking good boy character? Is like a massive good boy character is Corhill. Corhill, the captain of the White Lions, is like a living golden retriever. Like, he's the most like the power of friendship shall see us through. Like the end, some really unfortunate shit happens to Corhill in the end times. His story was a bummer. But Corhill was like super fucking awesome, heroic character. Lewin? No, actually no. Lewin Lanker, a big part of his legacy is his son. Lewin has a bastard son, Malobod, the Black Serpent. And we, the viewers, the audience, have no idea who his mother is. But it's not even for sure if Lewin has a wife. That's never been that well explored. I have no idea if Lewin has a wife. He probably does, but I've never seen her mentioned anywhere. But he definitely has a bastard son, being the Black Serpent, who is literally fucking what's his face from Arthurian legend. The kid that super famous character, I can't remember his name. Mordred, yeah. Malobod is literally just Warhammer Mordred. Though, funny enough, he's the modern day interpretation of Mordred, because actual Mordred from like back in the day, I don't believe has anything to do with being related to King Arthur. But in modern cultural zeitgeist, he is, which is interesting. All right. Cole Carrion. Was there any Polynesian / Maori races or factions? If not, how would you imagine they look like today? Would you make them human, inhuman, or both? So, Cole, are there any? No. Because the Warhammer world is very, very poorly explored. There is virtually nothing that we have on what's going on outside of the old world in the more modern editions. And by modern, I mean like 6th edition forward. Now, Games Workshop is starting to explore the world, which is great and very exciting. So in answer to your question, no, there is not. Would I like to see them? Yes, very much. Would I make them human? Yes. And I would make them human. I would make human and non-human versions. I would tie them in with the Fishmen. Where the Fishmen are a very well-established Warhammer Fantasy race. I would have the Fishmen have a relationship with them, that there's like cultural crossover and feedback between the two. But there would absolutely be human races. One of the things that's really bad about the Warhammer map that I fucking hate is there's no islands anywhere, compared to what there should be. There should be so many islands in the Warhammer world. Like, the Caribbean should be there. Like, you know, all those islands around there. The equivalent of, like, you could say the Lost Isles of Elithis are like kind of like Indonesian, but there should be way more islands than are depicted, and there should also be a Warhammer Australia. And that's not even to say all the islands between the east and the west by going from like Cathay to Nagaroth. There should be lots of islands along those oceans as well. So I think they should be in the lore. And I would do a mixture of, there are humans, but I would also have fishmen concepts tied in as well. So, yeah. Let's see. Darius Rose, what species of dragon would I categorize as Emperor class dragons? Okay, so... So, an Emperor class can come from any species. Any species. When a dragon reaches a certain size and power, it becomes Emperor class. According to the more modern stuff from, like, the Storm of Magic and the Monsters Arcanum. Is that Stormy? It is Stormy. What are you doing? Come here. Hold on, chat. Y'all got a special visitor. This is my brother's dog, Stormy. She's like the equivalent of my niece. And she is Sadie's best friend in the world. What are you doing? She's a little poodle mix. Hi, what are you doing? Okay, get out of here. Come on. Means my brother is visiting. But, if we look at the Storm of Magic, I will say, the dragons that in their base form, like the regular base form, are terrifying and very close to Emperor class dragons, are Ulthuani Star Dragons, Warp Fire Dragons, and Magma Dragons. Those are like the scariest motherfuckers in the world. Period. Like, holy fuck. If you see them, like, the only appropriate response is holy fuck. That being said, one of the things that was interesting about the Storm of Magic book is that when they talk about dragons in this book, if I recall correctly, something they did that was rather interesting is that when they describe the various kinds of dragons, they note that when they become Emperor dragons, they receive a new name. So this book actually specifies types of dragons that are only Emperor class. And the Emperor class dragons are the following. You have, when it comes to dragons that are associated with Akshi, the Wind of Fire, and have been influenced by the Wind of Fire, so they're big, scary, like, red fire-breathing dragons, you have the Doomfire dragon. So the Doomfire dragon is always Emperor class. You then have the Death Dragon, which is a big old fucking scary type of black dragon that is heavily associated with death magic, and it's called the Nightmare Dragon. You got the big old Nightmare Dragon. Then you have the dragon that is associated with the Wind of Hish, or the Wind of Light. And the Emperor class version is the Ice Dragon. So big old fucking scary Ice Dragon. Then you have the Lore of Life, or the Wind of Gyran, Emperor class dragon, which is the Venom Dragon. Wait, and to be clear, a regular Fire Dragon's Emperor class version is a Doomfire Dragon. A Black Dragon, as in a Nagarothi Black Dragon, its Emperor class version is the Nightmare Dragon. The Frost Dragon, so the Frost Dragons, which live up in like the Mountains of Morn and Norska and Kislev and all those places. The Frost Dragon's Emperor class version is the Ice Dragon. The Forest Dragon, which lives in Athel Loren and other notable forests, its Emperor class version is the Venom Dragon. And then the Storm Dragon, which are dragons that hang out really high up in the atmosphere and conjure storms and do a bunch of other crazy shit, has an Emperor and is associated with the Wind of Azir, or the Wind of Heavens, has an Emperor class version that is called the Great Storm Dragon. And then you have just the boring ones, like the Emperor class, the Emperor Chaos Dragon, the Emperor Magma Dragon, the Emperor Warp Fire Dragon, is how it goes from there. Because they decided they didn't want to be creative anymore. Tuckmeister, does Teclis compare to Mazda Money or Kairos? Does Teclis compare to Mazda Money or Kairos? No. I would say no. I would say he is one of the best mages the Elves have ever produced, and he's incredible, and his natural talent for magic is unrivaled among the Azur. And he is up there with the likes, he is... Teclis has a really special ability, which is his staff. So it's not really an ability. But the Moon Staff of Lalaeth basically allows Teclis to channel the power of a god to unleash one spell. One. And he's really, really good at using that. He used it to banish Nakari once. He used it to nearly kill Malekith at the Battle of Finneval Plain. It's a really good trick because it basically makes one of his spells virtually impossible to stop. Without that, Teclis is very good, but he is not a living god. Kairos Fateweaver and Lord Mazdamundi are more, and Nagash are more akin to living gods. I mean, hell, if you want, you could debatably put like Marathi or Malekith up on that tier as well. But notably, Teclis beat Malekith because of the Moonstaff. Without the Moonstaff, Teclis was able to hold Malekith in a stalemate, which is incredible. Because Teclis is a baby. Teclis is a little baby. He's only like 300 years old. By Elven standards, he's such a little bab. And he's incredible. But because he hasn't been around for that long, he's not really able to go reliably toe-to-toe with those characters. Hammond, is Tyrion falling decaying the reason why he gets cucked? Tyrion doesn't get cucked. I don't know why you're saying that. Did Alariel say, since you're a baddie now, I'll go with a better baddie and marry Malekith? Okay, oh, you're talking about that. Okay, so in the end times, at the end of Cain, which is book 3, Alariel has a political marriage with Malekith. But you have to understand a couple of things. A, Tyrion was dead. You cannot be cucked if you're dead, okay? It's just not how that works. Tyrion was dead. Gone. He had been pierced through the heart. He was 100%, undeniably, beyond a shadow of a doubt, fucking dead. He was dead. Dead, super dead. And Teclis had left with his corpse. Now, Alariel then had a political marriage with Malekith to reunify all of the elves under one banner. It was a purely political marriage. And Alariel fucking hates Malekith. And she makes that very clear. She has no interest in him whatsoever. Malekith, I don't really think had a lot of interest in her, to be honest, either. Like, it was purely political, and I just don't think they see each other that way at all. It was purely for politics. Yeah. Because, I'll put it this way. In the final scene we get of Teclis, Alariel, and Malekith in the end times, when the world is being destroyed and blowing up because the Chaos Portal is, like, going out of control, the last scene of art depicting those characters is literally Tyrion holding hands with Alariel and them standing together as a couple against the end of the world. Meanwhile, Malekith is on the ground because his lower body got crushed by falling debris. Because he pushed Alariel out of the way of said debris and it crushed his lower body. But, like, Malekith is just there by himself on the ground, like, dying in agony. And Tyrion and Alariel are like, sucks to be you, bro. And they like hold hands and cuddle together over in the corner when the world's about to die. So, yeah. Darius Rose, what if Guts from Berserk or Revi from Black Lagoon was Gotrek's Rememberer? How would they get along with Gotrek? Probably not well. I think if you had someone that was like a really powerful warrior who is very mentally ill and prone to extreme bouts of rage or depression or any number of other extreme issues, that it would feed into Gotrek's own depression and it would just lead to Gotrek to die really fast. Gotrek cannot be Gotrek in fantasy without Felix. He needs Felix because Felix is what stops him from just suiciding himself onto an impossible death. Felix is the one that sits there and goes, hey man, how about we don't go into this fight where you will definitely die because of XYZ reasons. Like, wouldn't it be better if we did this other thing instead? Like, Felix, the most important thing Felix does is two things. The first is that he stands behind Gotrek's and he always guards his left side. And second is that he always convinces Gotrek to survive another day, to run away, to ambush, to do things that a lot of Slayers are not willing to do for the greater good, to save someone else's life, to make sure the bad guy dies because he's vulnerable, to like save the world instead of just going for an easier doom. That is the purpose of Felix. What makes Felix so amazing and great is not that he's a great warrior. He's an okay warrior. Felix is not that great as a fighter. He's really not. He struggles against not like he he has a hard time against a lot of things. If you put Gotrek with another character like that, I think it would just result in him getting killed very, very quickly. Because they would not convince him to survive another day. And to pull away from a suicidal encounter to have a better doom. They would just be like, ah! And they would all just get themselves killed. Hammond. So the Emperor class equals Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan. Yeah, basically. I mean, they're dragons that are the most powerful. They're level 4 wizards in addition to being like 10s across their stat lines. They're fucking insane. Mr. Samurai Guy 689. How do you like the updated Kislev and Cathay lore units? Awesome, great, cool. Which is being handled better? How would you improve them? I think, well, I mean, Cathay is just better. 10 out of 10, period, better, because there was very little before that, and now we actually have stuff. So there is literally nothing about old Cathay I would keep. Throw it all in the dumpster. New Cathay is so much better, and it does a really good job of taking the old stuff and updating it. So I wouldn't change anything there. Now, there's a lot more to be explored with Cathay. There's a lot more to do. But I think what we have is great. Kislev overall is good. I really so okay, I'm gonna say something that's a little nasty. But I'm gonna say it. I really dislike. So, okay. How do I say this? There is a very, 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 very credible number of individuals I've talked to that I believe, because they're very credible sources, that have talked about things where Kislev makes Games Workshop uncomfortable because of the war in Ukraine, where Games Workshop has done something really fucking stupid, which is that they look at Kislev and they go, oh, it's Russia. It's Russia plus, and that's not what Kislev is. Andy and I have talked about this a lot. where Kislev is a mass conglomerate of a lot of Eastern European, Slavic, some Russian, and other Eastern cultures, distilled and then added in with a lot of fantastical elements to make something unique. But there's a really, really important element of Kislev, which is the conflict between cultures within it, of the Gospodarians versus the Ungolls versus the Rupsmen versus the other subculture groups. And Games Workshop doesn't understand that, is the problem. So I would absolutely kick down the door and go in there and fix that. GW needs to understand that Kislev is not Russia. And that what is happening with Russia being fucking assholes and waging the war in Ukraine should not reflect in any way whatsoever on Kislev. Because modern day Games Workshop is nervous about the Gospodarian versus Ungol depicting that and showcasing that as a major facet of the faction, which it should be, because they think it looks bad. And they're like, oh, that's gonna get us in trouble, even though it wouldn't. And it's super fucking dumb, and I hate it. So I would change that, because the conflict within Kislev's culture of that unique flair of cultures that have been conquered and that are refusing to assimilate, and the conflict that arises because of that, is central to their story. And Games Workshop very obviously is trying to whitewash that, and I don't like that, because it makes their story not as good. So that is what I would say to that. Also, I really like but for the most part, I like everything about the new Kislev. For the most part, I like everything. I like all the new magical creatures. I like the Great Orthodoxy. I like a lot. I like a lot of it, to be clear. I like that they got rid of... this is one I'll say. I like that they got rid of the secret police. And they replaced them with the Akshina, who make more sense. Because the Akshina are a much more realistic depiction of ways to watch out for chaos in society. And I didn't really like the old Kislev lore that had like the secret police that like black bag people in the middle of the night. I wasn't a huge fan of that. So yeah. That is what I will say about that. Necromancer Kobold. Would Warhammer Australia be a whole island dedicated exclusively to goblins? Goblinoids, Nobblars, Hobgoblins who worship spiders. No, I don't think I don't think Games Workshop would really want to, I don't think Games Workshop would want to run with the idea that Australians are goblins, because that's what it would look like. It's literally what it would look like. Is them saying, yeah, you know, Australians, yeah, they're greenskins, bro. I think Games Workshop is hell-bent, as they should be, in my opinion. I think Games Workshop is hell-bent on making sure that there is no real-world equivalent to greenskins. The greenskins are their own thing, and there is no culture that is associated with them whatsoever. Though making them Australians would be very funny. I'm not gonna lie. But probably not. If they did a Warhammer Australia, though, what they would probably lean into, I would guess, is you would probably see much... I think you would be more likely to see there be a human race that lives there. You'd probably see a mix. What you'd probably see is a large continent that has, you know, humans based on the aboriginals. So, like, native humans that have been there for a long time, who live with the environment, with the crazy-ass monster. Like, the creatures there would be fucking weird. They would be super weird, right? and horrifying. Like Warhammer Australia would be a literal fucking nightmare. And then the other element of it is I think you would have a empire, or probably the empire. The empire would probably have a colony somewhere on its shoreline borders, and then you would have a high elf tower somewhere around the island. So you would have a high elf culture, an empire, colonial culture. You'd have native humans, and maybe a native, a fantasy race that lives there as well, like a new fantasy race. And then it would be an insanely dangerous place. It would be so dangerous. Like, holy fuck, it would be dangerous. Oh my god, it'd be dangerous. Why not Dark Elves? Dark Elves don't really do that, is why. Dark Elves do not set up colonies. Dark Elves have Black Arcs. They have floating city fortresses, and they have large raiding groups of ships that go out into the world, fuck people up, take shit, and come back. They do not set up colonies. That's not how Dark Elves do. So I don't think it would make sense for them to do that. Now, would Dark Elves be a major threat to Warhammer Australia, and would they be a present force? Yes. But do I think that they would have a colony there? No, that just wouldn't make sense. That's not how Dark Elves do. British erasure, I always assumed greenskins were football. Well, yes, greenskins are football hooligans, but that's not a culture in that sense. Hobgoblin Khanate is kind of Mongols. Kind of, yeah. However, I think what the Hobgoblin Khanate is supposed to represent is the idea of the Horde, right? The idea of a titanic sweeping invasion of a warlike culture that is very nomadic, constantly stays on the move, and swarms by, kicks ass, takes names. I would say it is a mythical / fantastical interpretation. Wow. I'm gonna turn those off. Abuse your privileges. What I would say is that I don't know if this is gonna make sense. I'm gonna say it, and you may say, Sotek, that's dumb and doesn't make any sense. But what I would say is this. I would say that, to me, the Hobgoblin Khanate is not Warhammer Mongolia. To me, the Hobgoblin Khanate is a mythical, fantastical interpretation of Attila the Hun's grand horde that sweeps across the world, pillaging and destroying everything in front of it. Of a massive, unstoppable legion that makes the world quake and is nomadic and settles down nowhere. Which is different. Pulling from the idea of the Great Invader as opposed to a singular culture. And the reason I say that is that at least Attila the Hun was a Hun, not a Mongolian. Well, yeah, that's what I mean, though, right? Is that I would not consider the Hobgoblin Khanate to be Mongolian. I genuinely would not. I think if the Mongol equivalent actually would have more to do with some other Warhammer Fantasy races or human factions. Like one of the Kislevite subcultures is supposed to be very Mongol inspired. But like the actual Mongol people, not like that. I feel like the Khanate isn't that. And the reason I say that is because I don't think you ever want to have green skins and say, oh, well, this is fantasy, these people. Because it's just not a good look. Because greenskins are not good. They're a force of nature. But they're violent and, frankly, stupid. And they are destroyers and pillagers. They don't create. They are a force of destruction. Because, and this is something I don't think I used to think about a lot, but as I've gotten older, I think about more and more and more. Where you just want to watch where you step. And it's not because I don't think it's because you should be scared of like pushback. I don't think that's what it should be about. I think what it should be about is that you don't want to depict a group of real world people as savages, you know? Mr. Samurai Guy, sorry, second question. You don't need to apologize, especially when you're super chatting them. I'll always take money. Why does the Vampire Coast have access to zombie black powder units while the Vampire Coast does not? Okay, so this is something we actually talked about in the Vampire Coast Lorebeards episode, but the basic answer to that is that the Vampire Coast is made up of the corpses of sailors, primarily. So people that died at sea, who were on lots and lots of ships that had black powder. And many of those who are dead that have been risen to fight within the Vampire Coast have had a familiarity with black powder, and they used black powder in their wars. So when they were resurrected, those were the tools they were familiar with, and the vampires took advantage of that. Luther Harkin and his vampires took advantage of that and realized the potential of black powder and make effective use of it. When you're dealing with the vampires out of Sylvania, the land of Sylvania, actually, so an interesting thing is if you want to get super technical, you have the situation like you do in Total War, where the von Karsteins can actually take handgunners with living units. But the big thing it boils down to, I'm gonna super simplify this. The basic thing it boils down to is that when you resurrect a corpse in Warhammer, the more finesse that corpse requires to do something, the more magic and effort you have to invest into that corpse. In the old world, so the vampire counts, they traditionally rely on methods of using mass hordes of very shit tier undead who are only capable of stumbling forward and like biting people, clawing at people, or hitting them with things. Now, they have elite units where they invest more heavily into having, like the whites, which were properly preserved in death so that they could be brought back to do stuff. But generally speaking, you're making use of the things that were buried with them. They were buried with spears, they were buried with swords, they were buried with shields and armor, and they utilized those things in melee very effectively. When you're dealing with the sailors out on the Vampire Coast, they all died with guns. They died with cutlasses and guns and black powder. And that's what they know how to use really well. And if you provide them with those tools, they practice those methods so much in life that it takes relatively little effort to resurrect them and allow their corpses to continue practicing those motions that they did countless times in life. Whereas if you're over in Sylvania and you want to resurrect an army of corpses that wield guns, you have two options. The first is that you need to find a graveyard with a lot of dead people who had guns, which is not going to be easy because people are traditionally not buried with guns because guns are valuable and they usually don't let you bury them with them. So you're like, well, shit. Now I got to get myself a bunch of guns. So you either got to make guns, which none of those assholes know how to do, or you have to somehow get your hands on a bunch of people that knew how to work guns in life, and you are investing more effort to create higher caliber zombies, smarter zombies that are capable of performing the action of taking a gun, loading it, which back then loading a gun is more complex, aiming the gun and firing and doing it again. That is significantly more effort than telling a corpse to stand up, walk that way, and bite the first person he runs into. So that's the general gist of it. Is that the vampires of the Vampire Coast do not have the sheer volume of corpses to work with that the vampires of the old world do. So they invest more significantly into what they are capable of and take advantage of the talents that those individuals had in life in death. Hopefully that makes sense. Also, the real world reason is because pirates are cool and pirates have guns. If you actually go watch me and Andy's video on a live stream on the Vampire Coast, one of the things we talk about that is very funny is that in the grand scheme of the Vampire Coast, the vast majority of the Vampire Coast timeline wouldn't have guns because people from the old world with guns did not show up in around the Vampire Coast until relatively not that long ago, and Luther Harkin has been there forever. Luther Harkin has been there for such a fucking long time. So a lot of the Vampire Coast history probably didn't have black powder. It just nowadays it does. Which is funny to think about, but anyway. Sisman, thank you very much for the member. I really appreciate that. As a Slav, I see so much good in Kislev. There is already so much Ukrainian, Polish, and others. Games Workshop needs to accept Slavic annoyance with our cousins. I agree. And thank you for the membership. I really appreciate that. Memberships and subs are deeply appreciated. Hammond, Warhammer Aussies are all drop bear beastmen. That would probably be the most terrifying option, yes. Watch out for drop bears, guys. They're dangerous. You know what's funny? When I was younger, I swore to God, I thought drop bears were koalas for the longest fucking time. I thought all the jokes were like that koalas would like hang up on the trees and that you had to watch out because sometimes they would just like fall out of the tree and like land on people and like fuck them up. And that's what I thought drop bears were for the longest time. Darius, where would a Shaggoth be in comparison to an Emperor class dragon, since dragons and dragon ogres warred with each other? It would depend on the Shaggoth in question. It would have to be a big Shaggoth. Like a Kolek Sun Eater type. Shaggoth is a really broad classification because if you compare a regular Dragon Ogre Shaggoth against like Kolek Sun Eater is fucking insane compared to a regular Shaggoth. So there are some Shaggoths that are very, very big and very, very scary. And there are some Shaggoths that are pretty big, but not as big. An Emperor class dragon is up there with like Kolek Sun Eater. Like Kolek Sun Eater versus an Emperor class dragon is a fair fight. A regular basic bitch Shaggoth versus an Emperor class dragon is gonna get its shit rocked. That is not a fair fight. But Emperor class dragons are so fucking rare. They are so rare. Laughing God, I remember reading somewhere that the zombies of the Vampire Coast, I think you mean vampire counts, have a shred of their souls in them, making them semi-aware and more competent. That is very possibly the case in many circumstances, yeah. Often, the bigger something is, the bigger, ancient, more powerful something is, the more likely it is to have little pieces of itself still in there. Which means that if you resurrect it, the good news is it's going to be even more powerful and capable. The bad news is that it's going to take more out of you than you thought from just its sheer size alone, and there's a very realistic chance that you're going to lose control of it, and its sentience is going to kind of come back, and it's going to kill you instead. Oh, nice. We're caught up on Super Chat, so now I can start answering just random questions. What types of units can be added to the Vampire Coast? Okay, so don't hate me for this. I'm very I'm very opinionated about this, and a lot of people don't like it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Chinese inspired undead pirate, undead, because I think the jade-blooded vampires should be added to the Vampire Coast. I think that there should be a jade-blooded vampire queen of the pirates, who is the head of the jade-blooded vampire line, and should be inspired by that super fucking badass, famous, pirate woman from China who retired because she was such a badass. And if you look into Chinese inspired vampires like Chinese vampires and Chinese undead, they're weird. They're super weird. And you could get some really cool monsters from that. Also, I would definitely consider, harpooners, I think would be really cool, or like whalers. I 100% agree with that. So like zombie whalers or zombie harpooners. Harpooneers? Whatever. And I would also recommend, I think some kind of undead shark thing would be cool. Undead sharks sound neat. I hear rumors that Legend of Total War might be a drop bear. I believe it. I believe it. In lore, what sea monsters would be in a Fishman army? Would something like a Charybdis be in it? I imagine if we get Fishmen, it would heavily expand the Warhammer Ocean, would be cool. Shippy Totek. The Kraken, for one. The fact that the Kraken is not in a playable army drives me insane. So, Krakens, Megalodons, Black Leviathans. I would basically just look up any sea creature myth and just stick that shit in there. Scylla from, which is what inspires Charybdis. So, should Charybdii be in it? Yeah, sure. I think Charybdis could appear in that roster, and that'd be totally fine. They're deep sea creatures. I would do mermaids. So not naiads, mermaids, because the actual mermaids of Warhammer Fantasy are fucking terrifying. They're more like beastmen. They're really scary. So I would do mermaids. I would basically look at anything from the Lovecraft universe that's wet and gross and scaly and fish-like, and I would say give me all of that. And that should probably get you in a good place. Also, just do some actual research into, like, deep sea creatures and look how fucking weird they are. Get weird with it. Get real weird with it. Hammond, her right-hand man would be Bob Marley in the Whalers. I don't think a Cathayan man would be named Bob Marley. Yeah, Psych, I always hated that Games Workshop called Charybdis that, because Charybdis is a giant mouth whirlpool, whereas Scylla is the creature with all the heads, and Games Workshop was like, fuck it. Let's go with another question. What trolls want the Pathrog? Trolls don't want anything. Trolls are too stupid to want anything. I think you are grossly underestimating how stupid trolls are. Trolls do not want. They are. To be capable of wanting, you have to be capable of thinking ahead. To desire something in the future. Trolls don't do that. They dumb. They real dumb. Oh, I asked because river trolls... trolls are seemingly somewhat intelligent. Sometimes they are, yep. But how intelligent exactly? And what would their worldview and culture be like? I asked because river trolls seem to be more tribal. Yeah, and have some magic users. Okay, so magic... Oh, man, okay. Magic is not a sign of intelligence. Let's get that out of the way first. Magic is not a sign of intelligence. There are shamans, like a giant river troll hag, that is capable of magic. she is not intelligent per se. It is innate. It's no more saying a troll is intelligent than saying a troll is intelligent for knowing how to eat, or knowing that a troll is smart enough to pick up a stick and use that as a weapon when it might not otherwise. It is natural to them, which is in and of itself very interesting. But trolls do sometimes live in communities. Oftentimes, they do. Many different kinds. Some trolls are capable of ambush tactics because they have that. Sometimes they have that kind of like low bestial cunning, where they know how to set an ambush by like hiding out of sight and waiting for someone to like get close enough. It depends on what kind of troll you're talking about. Like stone trolls are really well known for being rather ambush heavy type creatures. There's also a bit of a thing that whenever you're dealing with an individual troll, many times an author will do something where they're like, wow, I'm going to make this troll a little smarter than the average troll. That way it's extra scary. But because so many authors do that, it makes the like surprisingly intelligent troll not as rare as it should be, really. Where like I don't know how many books I've read. The roleplay supplements in particular are really, really bad about this. Where whenever they introduce a troll, they'll be like, oh, but this troll's a little clever. Like this troll knows how to do this thing that trolls normally don't do. And it's like, well, then how about you just show me normal trolls and stop doing this bullshit? But they people like doing that. Authors are really shit about that, in my opinion. Generally speaking, though, the average troll, if the lore is to be believed, which is a big if the lore is to be believed as written, the average troll is literally so fucking dumb that they forget, like, they don't have object permanence. I'll put it that way. They're real dumb. Real fucking dumb. Like, if something is out of sight, it is out of mind, literally. Where they will be attacked and they won't react for several seconds because they don't realize they're in pain. Because they're too stupid for pain to register sometimes. Now, there are exceptions. Quite a few exceptions, as I just said. So, would trolls that are a little smarter want what Throg wants? I would say no. Because the thing about trolls is trolls live, even when they're a little smarter, they live very simple lives. A troll wants to eat, it wants to shit, and it wants to sleep. And maybe on a good day it wants to fuck. That's about it. Even when they're smarter. That is as far as it goes. They might desire to have a community, which is kind of what Throg wants. The thing you have to understand about Throg is Throg plays off what he's doing as a lot more ambitious than what it actually is. And what it boils down to is Throg is lonely. Throg is very, very lonely. He's the loneliest troll in the world because he's incredibly intelligent and he wants to have someone like him to talk to. And that does not exist. He is utterly, truly alone. And he wants someone like him to talk to so that they have empathy for him and they can relate to his experience. That is what he wants. And he will never have it. Never. And that's all that is. So do trolls want what Throg wants? Not really. Because what Throg wants is so unique. Do giant river troll hags have a spoken language in the lore, or is that just a Total War thing? They have to. They can speak something. I don't know if I would call it as complex as a language per se. But they speak something because language is spoken. Or magic is spoken. In order to cast magic, you have to say something specific. Talking is a core component of magic. So in order for a giant river troll hag to cast magic, she has to be saying something. Now, does she realize what she's saying? I don't know. That would be a little tricky. Would Famir? No, Famir are very different. Famir are very intelligent. Incredibly intelligent. But they're nothing like Throg. Famir are an incredibly, deeply ancient species that have had the world robbed from them, and they're very bitter and spiteful about it. And the Famir do not like anybody. They hate fucking everybody. Because the Famir were once on top of the world, in their own opinion, and it got stolen from them, and they got left behind by the very gods they worshipped, and they are bitter. Bitter. Famir are intelligent, but there's also not that many of them. They live on the absolute fringes of society, and their empires are puny. Throg should talk to that Gashnag? Nah, because Gashnag would probably think, like, I'm way too good for a fucking troll. And Throg would think I'm way too good for a fucking ugly vampire, and they would probably not get along that well. Throg is also... Yeah, Throg is very Frankenstein's monster. Throg is very much like Frankenstein's monster. But unfortunately for him, the equivalent of Dr. Frankenstein was the fucking Chaos Gods. So there's really not anybody that he can, like, take out his vengeance on. Are there any democratic societies in Warhammer? I don't think so. Not, kind of. Talea has a sort of democracy. Kinda. They have Talea has a what is it? It's like a merchant run republic type situation where they have like they have a triumvirate that, like, is able to make the laws and stuff, but the triumvirate is voted in by, like, other merchant families. So, like, it's a really complex political situation, and there's, like, a lot of like assassinating and scheming going on. So, like, they have a system of voting, and they have a system of representation to elect this trio, who is in charge. But you have to be among the merchant families to really have any sway. Estalia and... One second. Yes. Estalia has a monarchy, because Estalia has kings and queens. Ancient Remus might have been a democracy, maybe. What drove Ushori to build Strigoi? Because he wanted to make a better Lamia. He wanted to make a nation for vampires where they were on top, but they could also be out in the open and make an empire that would thrive and be great. But he quite literally just wanted a better Lamia. And he succeeded until his sister fucked him over. Ryan, I bought a copy of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay a while back and starting to learn it. Anyone know of places to find homebrew stuff? So the two best discords there are for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay are the Ratcatchers Guild, which is purely dedicated to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Well, I guess it's also dedicated to, like, one or two other things, but it's mostly Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And also the LAWhammer Discord, which you can find a link to the LAWhammer Discord in the description of this YouTube video. So, like, go down to the show more, and it's one of the links down there. And those two communities are very good for that. Who are better assassins, Dark Elves or Clan Eshin? I would say Dark Elves. Clan Eshin has some really kick-ass like super badass assassins, but Skaven have really, really, really short lives. They don't live that long, and even in the best case scenario, where they're like, oh, it's like Lord Sneak, the ruler of Clanesian. Like, even if you assumed he was like the greatest assassin, which I don't think he really is. The Lords of Decay are kind of a mess when it comes to like what they're personally capable of, because it's a little inconsistent about if the Lords of Decay are like the most powerful of the Skaven or if they're simply kind of like figureheads. It doesn't matter. But the thing about like, even if you are like, oh, Lord Sneak at best is like 200 something years old. Good Dark Elf assassins that are still around could easily be thousands of years old. Easily. It's just a matter of experience. Even though Skaven assassins are fucking insane. All right, and with that, we've got a couple more minutes before stream ends, but we're coming up to the end here. So if you got any last minute questions, now is a good time to get them in. But we are coming up on time. As just a heads up for those that care. Before I have to go get lunch to get ready for my WFRP session today, which is pretty hype. I've enjoyed this. I hope you all have had fun. This was just kind of a nice little chill. Like, typically, I think if I was going to do more of these AMA type streams, I think they would be much, much shorter. Like, we'd probably make them like 1 hour. Not 3. But I kind of wanted this to be y'all's pseudo Lorebeards for today, because I know y'all have been starving. Dreadsaurian versus dragons? Dreadsaurian most of the time. Dreadsaurians are like uber dragon killers. Especially if it's like an actual tabletop equivalent Dreadsaurian, because Dreadsaurians have Old One tech on them. They're bonkers. Does evil exist as its own thing, or do the Chaos Gods bring and cause evil? No. Well, I mean, okay, the philosophical answer is evil is a matter of perspective. The real answer is that evil existed before chaos. And it is not directly tied to chaos. There are things in the Warhammer world that are immune to chaos or stand against chaos, but they are still evil. Depending on how you define evil. But if you define evil as like things that cause torture and suffering and pain and all that stuff, then I would say there are lots of evil things that are not chaos sympathized. Also, Mornington Crescent, I'm sorry I missed your bits. Was Nagash wrong about the nature of the gods? Not entirely. He was kind of right, but he was also kind of wrong. But I would say he was. I give him like a 50-50. Rathlos, thank you for the 17 months, by the way. Psych, I was hoping to get into Idnet Deepkin for Age of Sigmar. I've been wondering what are the relations with Teclis when they get exposed. Not good. The Idnet Deepkin do not like Teclis because Teclis brutally genocided a lot of their people. When Teclis decided that they were failures and that in their creation they were flawed and they still had like hardcore spiritual PTSD from being in Slaanesh's guts, Teclis did the equivalent of, oh, well, better start over, and basically just started like wiping the slate clean in the most genocidal way possible. And obviously a lot of them escaped, but they do not think fondly of Teclis because of that. And many of them are afraid that should Teclis find them again, he would resume the genocide. Now, that's not what he would do, more than likely, because he deliberately let them go, but that's not much of a consolation to them. Hammond, if Ted Cruz became a beastman, how successful would he be? Well, he's a sniveling little cowardly cunt, so probably not that well. considering that the first sign of trouble, all he does is fucking run away like an absolute yellow-bellied bitch that he is. So, yeah, no, I don't think he'd do very well at all. Sweet Taters, how would I redo the Famir? GW seems to hate them. I mean, I think Total War and the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay game have been using the Famir very, very effectively. So I would probably just continue along that path, but I would actually probably do more to, like, describe what the Famir are like, talk about their fortresses out in the swamps, build up their culture, talk about the different classifications of Famir a bit more instead of just the warrior class, expand where they are in the world, what their relationship is with various other factions. I wouldn't change them that much. I would just agree with the idea that I would not have the Famir capture people to, like, sexually abuse them for some reason, because I don't understand why they did that in the first place, other than, oh, dark, edgy 80s fantasy bullshit, because it doesn't make sense. Like, they would breed through their own methods. They don't interbreed with humans, so I don't understand why they did the other stuff, other than hardcore 80s. 80s just being needlessly dark for the sake of it. So I would have them, you know, sacrifice people. Yeah, easy. Like, they would sacrifice people like crazy. They'd kill people all the time. I would just get rid of the sexual themes, because it's very unnecessary and doesn't add anything. Necromancer Kobold. How would I go about playing a Necromancer PC? To play a Necromancer PC properly in WFRP, it has to be a secret. You should keep it to yourself at all costs. You should pretend to be some kind of wizard, either being a sanctioned wizard at the colleges, or if you want to be extra spicy, pretending to be like a hedge witch or something along those lines, or a priest of Moor, even though in reality you're a necromancer. And I would really play up, why are you a necromancer? Who is it that you lost that you're trying to get back? Because necromancers can be deeply sympathetic characters if played correctly. Did you lose a child, a parent, a lover, a sibling, a best friend? Like, why is it that you're trying to reverse the effects of death? What is it you're trying to accomplish? Even though, and the thing that a necromancer character should have in spades is obsession and the inability to let go, is what I would say to that. Also, as much as I like to clown on him, Helman Gorst actually has a reasonably good story for why people become necromancers, so you can check that out. No. Hammond, if Ted Cruz became a No, Ted Cruz is good for nothing. He's literally good for absolutely nothing. Dude's just like a waste of flesh and oxygen. The only thing he would be good for is, like, maybe feeding an ogre, though the ogre would probably get nuts at tummy because of how rotten the meat is that just went in his body. Laughing God, is Loek fantasy Sheogorath? Yes. 100%. Though Loek does not have clown themes. He has other themes. I mean, you could portray him as a clown if you really wanted to, but elves don't really have a clown culture like the Harlequins. You know, they have, like, the shadow dancers instead. But yes, Loek is fantasy Sheogorath. Alright. Anywho, do I think we should get Dark Elves at Age of Sigmar? Yes, and they're coming at some point. The Umbraneth. The Shadow Elves. They're coming at some point, but I don't know fucking when. Alright, anyway. That is it for today's stream. I hope you all had a good time, and this was a nice, relax and chill stream for y'all. I really appreciate you all taking the time to come hang out and spend some time with me. Because it's just me today, I'm going to do something a little different, and I am going to send you all on raids. So I'll send some of y'all to watch on YouTube. I'll send y'all to watch, like, a little Total War stream of a friend. And on Twitch, I don't know where I'm going to send y'all yet. I'll figure that out in a moment. But yeah, I hope you had fun. Please do take care of yourselves. Be safe. Treat yourselves with kindness. Make sure to stretch, drink water, Get some sunlight. Treat yourselves well. Treat yourself like you deserve to be treated, which is with love and affection. Take care of yourselves. Twitch, where the hell are you nerds gonna go? I don't see anything that's really jumping out at me. I guess y'all are gonna go somewhere weird. Somewhere we've never been before weird. Super weird. We're going to a land we've never been to before. Oh wait, is Melissa? Oh. I'm not following her. That looks perfect. This is still going to be super weird in a place we've never been before, but it's a different kind of weird in a place that we've never been before. Alright, anyway. Hope you all have a lovely day. And, yeah, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye! Bye-bye! Get the fuck out of here. Get out of my face. Bye-bye! Bye-bye. Wait, is it Hawk's birthday? Why didn't you say that earlier? My memory for this shit's terrible. Happy birthday, Hawk. Why didn't you fucking say that sooner, you bitch? Alright, anyway. Alright, get out of here. Fuck out of here. Bye. Go away. Go away. Bye.